Hi, sorry, I was just
Yes,
cut out. I'm
Yes.
back.
we're live. Okay. All right. Good morning and welcome to the public hearing and public meeting of June 22nd, the public hearing and public meeting for the Landmark Preservation Commission. We'll begin by taking attendance, and I will ask our counsel, Mark Silverman, to take the roll call, or do the roll call.
Chair Carroll.
Mark? Here.
Chair Carroll. Vice Chair Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Lutfi. She was here before.
Muted.
She's muted.
Muted.
I'm unmuted here.
And Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here.
All right, good morning and welcome to today's public hearing and public meeting. We're really excited about the agenda today. We have a little bit of everything. We will begin the day with a public meeting for two proposed designations for which we recently held public hearings, and that will be followed by a public meeting for applications for work on designated properties that have also already had a public hearing and are returning today with revised proposals in response to Commission's comments made at that public hearing. And after that, we will hold public hearing on new applications for work on designated properties. This hearing and meeting are being held via Zoom and live streamed on YouTube. If you would like to watch the proceedings, please visit our YouTube channel to watch the live stream. If you would like to testify on any of the hearing items this afternoon, please join the meeting at the estimated time for that item as shown on our hearing agenda, which can be found on our website. We will also be providing simultaneous translation for the first proposed designation into both Mandarin and Cantonese. And if you would like to listen to the translated proceedings, please join the meeting through our link on our website. And once you're in the meeting, you can click on interpretation and choose the language you'd like to hear. And with that, I will turn it over to our Director of Research, Kate Lemos-McHale, to take us through the public meeting agenda for our proposed designation.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Our first item this morning is LP 2653, the Kimlau War Memorial, within Kimlau Square, Chatham Square and East Broadway, Manhattan, Block 117, Lot 100 in part. The item proposed for designation is a granite ceremonial gateway designed by architect Hoi Gum Lee and dedicated in 1962 as a memorial to Chinese American war casualties. Designed by architect Hoi Gum Lee and dedicated in 1962, the Kimlau War Memorial is a granite ceremonial gateway located in Kimlau Square at the intersection of Chatham Square, Oliver Street, and East Broadway in Manhattan. The arch, sponsored by the American Legion, honors Chinese American soldiers who died while serving in the United States military. The memorial is named after Second Lieutenant Benjamin Ralph Kimlau, a Chinese American pilot who died while attacking Japanese military installations in the South Pacific in World War II. The arch and its pair of benches consist of a unique blend of traditional Chinese architectural forms with a streamlined mid-century modern aesthetic and has served as an important community monument for nearly 60 years. At the June 1st public hearing, 12 people testified in favor of the proposed designation, including representatives of the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, City Council member Margaret Chin, the Historic Districts Council, the Lieutenant B.R. Kimlau Chinese Memorial Post 1291 of the American Legion, the Sons of the American Legion Post 1291, the Bowery Alliance of Neighbors, and 4 individuals, including the niece of Lieutenant B.R. Kimlau. No one spoke in opposition to the designation. In addition, the Commission received 51 written submissions in support of the proposed designation, including from the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, the United War Veterans Council, the Chinese American World War II Veterans Recognition Project, and the Chinese Center on Long Island, and from individuals, including veterans and members of the American Legion Auxiliary, and the Sons of the American Legion. We're very grateful for all of the support. The Kimlau War Memorial is located within Kimlau Square in Chatham Square. It was identified as part of a broader study of Chinatown, and it's important as a public monument and symbol of Chinese contribution to Chinese American contribution to United States history. Its prominent location at the intersection of Chatham Square, Mott Street, and East Broadway is indicated by the star on this map. Chinatown has a fascinating layered history. While there are several New York City landmarks in the Chinatown area, none were designated specifically and primarily because of their significance to the Chinese American community. The Kimlau War Memorial would be the first New York City landmark that specifically recognizes Chinese American history and culture. Until the 1870s, few Chinese immigrants settled in New York City. The majority of immigration from China in the 1840s was related to railroad construction in the western part of the country. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, coupled with an outbreak of anti-Chinese violence in the West, caused many immigrants to relocate to New York City in the vicinity of Mott, Pell, and Doyer Streets at the northwest side of Chatham Square. As early as the 1880s, Chinese shops faced the square. Though the growth of Chinatown slowed after the discriminatory 1882 Exclusion Act restricted Chinese immigration to the United States, the community built complex organizations, and its restaurants became attractions to New Yorkers and tourists by the turn of the century. Despite being denied full citizenship and facing extensive racial discrimination, approximately 20,000 Chinese Americans enlisted and fought for the United States during World War II. The Chinese Exclusion Act was repealed in 1943, and small quotas of immigrants were allowed over the next 2 decades. In 1965, immigration from Asia was opened widely, leading to the rapid expansion of Manhattan's Chinatown, as well as new Chinatown communities in Queens and Brooklyn. Located in Lower Manhattan between the Manhattan and Brooklyn bridges, the area around Chatham Square was developed early in New York City's history and has held a significant central location in Chinatown since the late 19th century. The irregular street grid forms this intersection of multiple streets with an asymmetrical plaza. The street configuration has changed over time, most recently in 1999 when St. James Place was closed off and the square expanded into the former roadway. Chatham Square functioned as an open-air livestock market until the 1820s. In the mid-19th century, it was part of the Five Points neighborhood and was known for its infamous saloons and tattoo parlors. By 1880, Chatham Square was an important junction of the 2nd and 3rd Avenue elevated train lines. Until the middle of the 19th century, it was cast in perpetual shadow by the elevated lines that intersected overhead. In 1955, the elevated tracks were replaced by the below-grade subway, bringing daylight to the area for the first time in 75 years. In 1961, a small crescent of land was laid out in Chatham Square as a public place named Kimlau Square, after 2nd Lieutenant Benjamin Ralph Kimlau. Dedicated in 1962, the memorial erected there was a gift of the Lieutenant B.R. Kimlau Chinese Memorial Post 1291 of the American Legion. The dedication of the monument was of great significance to the Chinese American community and veterans in particular. The dedication ceremony drew large crowds, seen in the newspaper photo on the right. The American Legion is a national organization formed by World War I veterans with a mission to care for disabled and sick veterans. It established hospitals and sponsored the creation of the Veterans Administration. There are currently more than 15,000 local American Legion posts. The Lieutenant Kimlau post is the largest in New York City and occupies a building nearby on Canal Street. Both the post and the war memorial are named for Benjamin Ralph Kimlau, who moved to Chinatown with his family as a teenager and lived here until he left to travel to China. Upon his return to the United States, he enrolled at the Pennsylvania Military College and graduated in 1942 with honors. He was class president and the only Chinese American in his class. Despite widespread discrimination against Asian Americans in the 1940s, Kimlau served as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army Field Artillery Branch. He later transferred to the U.S. Army Air Forces and trained as a pilot. He died while attacking Japanese military installations in the South Pacific in World War II at the age of 26. The Kimlau War Memorial was designed by the Chinese-American architect Gum Lee. Born at 13 Mott Street in 1900, he was educated at Pratt, MIT, and Columbia. He worked for a time in Shanghai in the 1930s and became prominent there before returning to New York. He later served as supervising architect and project advisor for the New York City Housing Authority. He also had his own practice in Chinatown that blended Art Deco, modernism, and Chinese vernacular forms. Gum Lee's work has been cited by scholars as among the most important Chinese American architecture of its time. Many of the recognizable buildings associated with the Chinese American community in Chinatown were Lee's designs or developed from his concepts. Among Lee's work in Chinatown in the 1950s and 60s is the development of the concept design for the Chinese Merchants Association building at 184 Canal Street, the Pagoda Theater, a Chinese movie house at 11 East Broadway, which has since been demolished, the Wong Family Association building at 24 Bowery, which has been altered, and numerous storefronts. Lee's designs in Chinatown reflect his modernist background while incorporating vernacular features such as tile roofs with upturned eaves. These are early renderings of the memorial arch from the New York City Parks Department archives. According to the Kimlau Post of the American Legion, an even earlier scheme proposed a larger structure, which posed challenges given the size and the location of the site. The Kimlau War Memorial is a simplified version of a Pei Lu or Pei Thong, a traditional gateway in Chinese architecture that evolved from Buddhist forms in India. Traditionally composed of wood and stone with elaborately tiled upturned roofs, they were decorative gateways into villages or cemeteries. Contemporary examples are often erected as memorials, such as this one, or as recognizable gateways into Chinatowns throughout the world. These drawings show the evolution of the design to its ultimately more modern appearance, blending traditional Chinese architectural forms like the peaked roof and brackets with a streamlined aesthetic. The memorial's Asian-inspired architecture reflects the character of the area in the center of Manhattan's Chinese American community. As Lee's design evolved, many of the vernacular ornamental details were simplified and made more modern. We don't know the specific reason for these changes. We suspect it was in line with the architect's own design preferences, and possibly a more restrained, sober design was seen as more appropriate for a monument to those who gave their lives in service to this country. As completed, the Kimlau War Memorial is a restrained modern granite ceremonial gateway with a peaked roof flanked by 2 benches finished in pebbled concrete. Inscribed at the top of the arch in both Chinese and English are the words, "In memory of the Americans of Chinese ancestry who lost their lives in defense of freedom and democracy." The monument's details, such as incised joints that echo the design of a vernacular Chinese tile roof, reflect the cultural traditions of the Chinese American community that surrounds Kimlau Square in a striking modern expression. In the late 1990s, the footprint of the park was expanded by the closure of St. James Place. The reconfiguration of the street grid expanded the park and addressed some of the dangerous pedestrian conditions in the area. New pavers were installed around the monument, distinct from the paving through the rest of the square. And in 2001, the Parks Department's first historical signage in Chinese was installed at the arch. Kimlau Square sits at the epicenter of today's expanded Chinatown as a site of honor for Chinese American veterans. It serves as an important place of pride, gathering, and remembrance of the sacrifices of the Chinese American community for a country that has not always fully accepted them or acknowledged their contributions. The memorial has played an important role as the terminus of parades on Memorial and Veterans Day, and as a place of important celebrations and ceremonies. Shown here are images provided by the Kimlau Post of the American Legion. The tax lot retains the irregular shape created by the former street pattern, as you can see on this map, and the current footprint of Kimlau Square dates to the late 1990s. So rather than utilizing either of these now unrelated boundaries, the proposed landmark site would consist just of the footprint of the Memorial Gateway and the adjacent benches. The Kimlau War Memorial is a place for remembrance and reflection, situated in a prominent location in Chinatown. The Kimlau War Memorial is significant as a public monument dedicated to the contributions of Chinese Americans to American history. It's designed by the architect Poi Ji Lee, and its prominence as a symbolic gateway to Chinatown. The arch and benches retain a high degree of integrity to their original construction, and the Kimlau Square is under the care of the New York City Parks Department, and a restoration or rehabilitation of the memorial is currently being planned. The research department recommends the commission vote to designate this monument, and Lisa Buckley from the research staff, who wrote the designation report and this presentation, is here with me to help respond to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Commissioners, do we have any questions for Kate or Lisa? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. I'm going to start by saying that the Kimlau War Memorial was identified as part of our broader study of Chinatown and the Chinese American community in New York City, and is a public monument prominently located within Chinatown. It's an important landmark. It would be an important landmark recognizing the work of Poi Ji Lee, and a significant Chinese American architect, and the Chinese American community's contributions to American history. And I was very moved by all of the testimony we received at the public hearing, in particular from veterans, about how important this monument is in recognizing the sacrifices made for this country, and how meaningful it is that it is recognized and potentially protected as a New York City landmark. So I want to just say that I'm, delighted that we're voting on this today, and we're really grateful for the support from the Parks Department, Commissioner Silver and Borough Commissioner Castro, and for all of the people who participated in this process. It was really moving, and I think shows the importance of equitable representation across the city. Would anyone else like to say anything? Yes, Commissioner Devonshire.
Thanks, Sarah. I just had a question. I'm not sure if we determined what the reason for the barriers was. Is it because of the condition of the gate, or something else? And how long are we going to have to live with that? I mean, it's really a distraction to this very important monument.
There are some structural concerns, and the Parks Department is currently doing probes and monitoring it in order to determine a restoration plan. And we'll work closely with the Parks Department on that restoration plan, but we're expecting that to follow shortly. So I think in the near future, it's very possible we'll be seeing a lot of work happening here.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Bland.
Unmute. Yes. Of course, I'm fully supportive of this, and in great admiration of yours and the staff's emphasis on this new direction during your time as chair. And all I want to say is that I hope this is the first of many other laudable Chinese American buildings and other attributes of their increasing numbers in our city and increasing influence in our culture. So I just so supportive of this, but I hope there'll be more.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
couldn't agree more with what Fred said, but just on a technical level, it seems that the benches are going to be part of the designated landmark.
Yes.
But from what I can glean from the report, is the location of the benches is not determined to be the location of in the original design, and I would just urge that the report indicate that if that is the case, that flexibility is extended to the placement of it based on where the Parks Department would deem it appropriate. And I think that would also go for the paving material. If that is deemed to be, it's pointed out that it was made different from the rest of the plaza. And again, I would just ask the staff to look at that, and if there's some significance to the distinction that was made, in their view, that they indicate that a special paving of some kind be retained, so that when the Parks Department does restore restore the monument and look at the plaza again, in the absence of the barriers, they can have the flexibility to do what they think is best within the bounds of what the research shows.
Okay, thank you. We will note both of those things. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I just want to take this moment to thank the commission and all the people who came out to support, and as well as Parks Department. And just to echo all the comments from my fellow commissioners that, yeah, I think this is a historic moment for the Chinese community. We were deprived for 100 years. The influx of Chinese American really did not happen until 1980, because it's 100 years behind 1882, and the community has caught up big time. And so in these dark times, in a few months, we will be standing underneath the arch commemorating the 20th anniversary of 9/11, as we do each year. So it's my sincere hope that, as Commissioner Bland said, and as the two Commissioner Michael Goldblum and Devonshire said, that I hope that we begin the healing and the restorative process. I pass by this arch every day, and I see the crack, and there's a structural crack on the left side of the slide, and I hope the Parks Department, and also as well Commissioner Goldblum's comment about flexibility, is my sincere hope that long after we're gone, when Second Avenue subway comes down, when the subway emerges, this is the first landmark structure that the public will see. I was wondering whether they ever recover Lieutenant Kimlau's body, and apparently I think they did, because he's buried at the Arlington Cemetery. But this is very much to that Jewish doctor who's buried half a block away. There's Walter Jonah Judah, who's during the last pandemic chose not to leave town and stay behind to help the community, and he paid for with his life, which around the corner is named after him, buried in the Jewish cemetery, and he didn't make it to his 25th birthday. So here, a pair of young men, one of Jewish descent and one of Chinese descent, and they are both being remembered here on this historic day. And I thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chen. Okay, so if there are no other questions, why don't we move to vote? Commissioner Chen, would you make the motion on this one?
It'll be my honor. I move that Landmarks Preservation Commission designate the Kimlau Memorial within Kimlau Square, Chatham Square, and East Broadway, Borough Manhattan, as a New York City landmark because of its special character and special historic and aesthetic interest and value as part of the development, heritage, and cultural characteristic of the city, state, and nation, as set forth in the designation report for LP-2653, dated June 22nd, 2021, I also move that Borough of Manhattan Tax Map Block 117, Lot 100, in part be designated as its landmark site as described in designation report and illustrated in the attached map. And I also have to thank Lisa and Kate for doing this brilliant research, this extensive, and all the staff at the LPC.
Thank you. Commissioner Bland, would you second the motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin, not here, Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, that's designated our latest New York City landmark and the first New York City landmark designated specifically for its recognition of the Chinese American community. So I'm delighted for it. Thank you all. Okay, and we'll move to the next item.
Great, thank you. Item number 2 is LP 2648, Conference House Park Archaeological Site in Conference House Park, 298 Satterlee Street, aka 298 to 300 Satterlee Street, Staten Island, Block 7857, Lot 1 in part. Item proposed for designation is an approximately 20-acre site within Conference House Park that is associated with over 8,000 years of occupation by Indigenous people and contains important archaeological resources. Commissioners, the proposed landmark was calendared and heard as the Conference House Park Archaeological Site. And as we mentioned at both of those meetings, the staff has been working with the city's federally recognized tribes on a landmark name that reflects the significance of the site to Native American history and what this designation is about. As a result, we propose that the name of the landmark be changed to Akawahang Manahanang, Island Protected from the Wind Archaeological Site.
Sorry.
Okay. And we'll be referring to it by that name during this presentation and in the designation report. The name Akawahang Manahanang, which translates to Island Protected from the Wind, is derived from the Old Munsee language name for Staten Island, which historic documents suggest may have also applied to this particular site, located at the southern end of Staten Island in Tottenville. The Akawahang Manahanang Island Protected from the Wind Archaeological Site is associated with over 8,000 years of occupation by Indigenous peoples and contains the region's largest known cultural complex. It is the best preserved known archaeological site associated with an Indigenous presence in New York City. It's proposed as the city's first landmark, specifically recognizing the many generations of Indigenous peoples who lived here. Designation would protect the site's below ground archaeological resources. At the public hearing on May 18th, 5 people spoke in support of the proposed designation, including representatives of the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, the Delaware Tribe of Indians, the Professional Archaeologists of New York City, Historic Districts Council, and the Society for the Architecture of the City. There was no testimony in opposition to the proposed designation. And in addition, the commission received 8 letters of support, including from the Stockbridge Munsee Community Tribal Historic Preservation Office, the Society for American Archaeology, the New York Archaeological Council, the New York Landmarks Conservancy, Historic House Trust, the Conference House Association, and 2 individuals. Shown here in red, the proposed landmark site includes approximately 20 acres of highly archaeologically sensitive land located within the city's Conference House Park. There are 2 designated New York City landmarks located directly north of the proposed landmark site: Conference House, which gives the park its name, and the Henry Hogg Biddle House. Indigenous peoples have lived in what is now New York City for thousands of years. As indicated on this timeline, Indigenous peoples were present within the proposed landmark site for over 8,000 years. One of the earliest sites discovered on the East Coast was in Staten Island, about 3 miles to the north of the proposed landmark site. There, artifacts were found dating to about 13,000 years ago. In this earliest period, the geography and ecology of the area were very different. People only stayed in places for brief periods of time as they focused on hunting big game like mastodon. Over the next millennia, the area evolved to become a place with abundant and varied resources, including nut-bearing trees, fish, and shellfish like oysters, and smaller game like deer and turkeys. The Lenape began to stay in places for longer, and in the woodland period, beginning about 1,500 years ago, villages were built as local resources were utilized to support more people for longer lengths of time. Archaeology can and has shed light on what life was like for the people who lived in this area over this long period of time. The proposed landmark site was visited and utilized for thousands of years. Today, it overlooks the confluence of Arthur Kill and the mouth of the Raritan River, an important estuary that significantly shaped the area's ecosystem. Indigenous people certainly relied on the area's abundant resources that surrounded the site, including ample oysters, fish, and game. In the woodland period, a village was likely at this site, as well as a cultural complex. The people who lived here were Lenape and spoke Munsee. We are not certain of the name of this village or how many generations of people lived here, but at least in the 17th century, the village may have been called Akawaham Manahanang, which was also used as the name for Staten Island. It has been translated as island protected from the wind by the linguists consulted by the Delaware tribe of Indians that we worked with. This Dutch map from 1636 shows the locations of many indigenous villages at that time. None are shown on Staten Island, but that is likely a reflection of the ignorance of the map maker. Archaeology has provided information about the proposed landmark site's long occupation. Over 19 archaeological projects have occurred in the vicinity of the proposed landmark site since the 19th century, including work by the American Museum of Natural History in the late 19th century. These projects uncovered an important cultural complex that was used over a long period of time. In addition, over 100 archaeological features primarily associated with the woodland era settlement were uncovered. The archaeologists also uncovered a series of hearths and other artifacts from the early Archaic period, about 8,000 years ago, confirming that cooking, butchering, and tool making were among the activities that occurred at the site. The site still contains archaeological resources, including the shell midden shown here on the right. The close-up view on the left is provided for reference from a different site. Shell middens are collections of discarded shells, usually oyster, that sometimes include other types of food waste, tools, and on occasion culturally sensitive materials, and provide further indication of the long use of the site by indigenous people. A series of wars erupted in the 1640s and 1650s as Europeans violently colonized land on Staten Island. In 1670, the British drafted a land deed that involved several signatories of indigenous peoples who were Lenape and spoke Munsee. While Europeans viewed contracts such as this as a purchase agreement, scholars have noted that at this time the Munsee did not perceive them in the same way, understanding them more as temporary tenancies. We don't know when the last indigenous people left the area, but there is little archaeological evidence of an indigenous presence in the vicinity of the landmark site after the mid-1670s, indicating that by that time, the expanding British settlement had largely succeeded in forcing out the population of indigenous peoples here. In 1676, Christopher Billop received a land patent from the Crown for more than 1,000 acres. It included the proposed landmark site as well as the land to the north on which he built Conference House, named for an unsuccessful peace conference held there during the Revolutionary War. The Henry Hogg Biddle House, built circa 1853 by a wealthy real estate developer, is located just north of Conference House. Photos of these two designated landmarks are shown on this slide. After Samuel Ward purchased nearly 400 acres of land in the area, it became known as Ward's Point. And although it was surveyed and laid out in the 1870s, it remained largely undeveloped, as is evident in the 1907 Robinson map on the right. A few streets in the area were paved prior to the 1920s, and the curbs, street lamps, and trees that line these streets remain visible in some places within the landmark site. The proposed landmark contains significant historic era archaeological resources, including evidence from the period of contact between Indigenous people and European colonists and the colonial period. For example, projectile points made of copper and brass have been found at the site. These metals became available once Europeans began to trade with the Indigenous peoples, and so finding evidence of such points is considered a key indicator that the site was used in the contact period. This image is a Dutch depiction of their encounter with the Indigenous people, drawn in 1651. In 1926, Conference House Park was donated to the City of New York, and today it remains under the ownership of the Department of Parks and Recreation. The modern park includes paths like the one shown here on the right, hiking and biking trails, and a visitor center. Woodlands and beach comprise the remainder of the site. The photo on the left was taken recently when members of the tribal nations joined a few of our staff to visit the proposed landmark site. The proposed landmark would be New York City's first to formally and specifically acknowledge and recognize the thousands of years of Indigenous occupation and settlement in the area. As a New York City park, the site has long been protected and cared for by the city's Department of Parks and Recreation. After designation, LPC would review all projects within the proposed landmark site with the potential to impact archaeological resources. Commissioners, as was discussed at the public hearing, this is a coastal shoreline site, and there are resiliency issues here related to rising sea levels and stormwater runoff that are exacerbated by climate change. Projects are underway in the vicinity of the proposed landmark site to help mitigate the effects of climate change. It is likely there will be further challenges in the future that will need to be addressed here to protect the site and preserve its significant archaeological resources. This map shows the proposed landmark site very closely corresponds to the boundaries of the National Historic Landmark outlined in green, which was established in 1993 as the Ward's Point Archaeological Site to preserve its archaeological resources. The area is also listed in the National Register of Historic Places as the Ward's Point Conservation Area, which encompasses the proposed landmark site. And LPC's research for this proposed landmark site involved collaborative engagement with the city's federally recognized tribes. And we met several times with the tribal historic preservation officers representing the Delaware Tribe of Indians, the Delaware Nation, and the Stockbridge-Muncie Community Band of Mohicans. They provided meaningful input and guidance regarding resources, preferred terminology, and the landmark name, which now better reflects its Indigenous significance. The designation report reflects their input, and we are very grateful for their crucial guidance. Designation of the Akawahang Manahanang Island Protected from the Wind Archaeological Site would protect and preserve the largest and best documented known site associated with thousands of years of Indigenous habitation in New York City. The archaeology and research departments have collaborated on this project, and Amanda Sutphin, Director of Archaeology, and Mary Nell Norwin-Wheatley are here with me for any questions. And Margaret Herman has been involved in both of these designations this morning as well. Staff recommends that the commission vote to designate the Akawahang Manahanang Island Protected from the Wind Archaeological Site as an individual New York City landmark. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the team on this? Yes, Commissioner Shamir Barron. You have to just accept the request to unmute.
I may have asked a version of this before, but I think, can you explain the kind of the the overlap and difference between archaeological sites and scenic landmarks as it relates to this. It seems to be both.
Right, and this is a designation as an individual landmark specifically to protect the below ground resources. So rather than a scenic landmark, which may be a more designed park, and that is more considered with, you know, the pathways, the light fixtures, the design of the park, this one really is focused on the archaeological resources. And the protecting them. So anything that would happen in this park that may impact below ground resources.
So the definition of a scenic landmark is really a designed landscape that is significant by virtue of its designer or its natural elements, but it's about a significant design landmark, and that's so they're city-owned parks and parkways like Eastern Parkway and Ocean Parkway. So this particular site and the purpose of designation didn't fit within that definition. It falls really under the definition of an individual landmark. Okay. All right, any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Goldblum.
Yeah, so to follow up on what Adi said, so if the Parks Department were tomorrow to want to pave the site with asphalt in a way that didn't affect anything underground, and just put a layer of stuff on top,
Right.
or other modifications that would change, you know, removal of trees without going to the roots, would those things be approvable on a staff level in this kind of district?
Yes, but I do think if you're talking, I mean, a tree is one thing, removing a tree with its roots would be another thing. You know, the installation of fences may have posts that need to go down and may also affect the low grade. So there are certain elements that would be above ground that could potentially impact the below ground resources, and we would be looking at those for that potential impact. But otherwise, we would be not really regulating other features that above ground that don't affect the below ground surface. Mark, do you want to? Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I would just point out that especially with this type of archaeological resource, resources are not. Many of them are not that deep. So some of them are in fact quite visible. So it's not quite the same as like the African burial ground, maybe where there's things are a little bit deeper. Even in that case, they're not that deep. But so really any kind of work that's going to require footings and pathways required that there be, you know, that they affect the landscape. So all that stuff will be reviewed for potential impacts on archaeological resources. And if they're not going to, you know, have those impacts, we're not going to, you know, review them. So.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Devonshire.
Thanks, Sarah. Does Parks have plans for future archaeological investigations?
Kate?
Not that I am aware of. I think the location of resources within this site has been determined. So I don't know of any. Amanda, I don't know if you want to jump in on that, but I don't believe there are current plans for that.
No, there aren't any current plans that I'm aware of.
And I should just say that I think that the Parks Department and works closely with Amanda and has over the years. So there's a lot of good communication and consultation.
Okay, other questions? Okay, all right. Well, I'll kick off the discussion on this one as well. Again, because I'm, you know, so excited about this sort of being another first for us. And, you know, if designated, this would be the first landmark, specifically recognizing its many thousands of years of Native American history and culture, and is the region's largest known cultural complex with incredibly important archaeological resources. And while our designation reports of landmarks and historic districts throughout the 5 boroughs always include Native American history prior to the urban and architectural development of the city's existing fabric, this is the first designation focused specifically on that history and the resources associated with it. And I'm really proud, again, of our staff's work, the collaboration between our archaeology department and Amanda Sutton, our director of archaeology, and our research department, of course, Kate leading it, along with Mary Nell Nolan and Margaret Herman, the deputy director of research, and Jessica Strebel-McLean also working in the archaeology department with Amanda. It was a great collaborative team, and I'm really proud of the fact that that we were doing such inclusive research and collaboration with the city's federally recognized tribes, as well as with the Parks Department, with whom we've had a great relationship with at this site, and they've consulted with us in the past, and now are embracing this more formal relationship. So, this work has really helped us to more fittingly recognize the site and its history through its landmark name. And I believe this is New York City's first landmark in the Old Munsee language. So another first aspect to it. So again, I'm so grateful for our team and their collaboration, for the collaboration and information from the city's federally recognized tribes, and for the support from the Parks Department. So Commissioner Gustafson, I see you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
I obviously agree with everything that Chair Carroll just said. And I appreciate very much our progress in our view of history as not just as a Staten Island, but as a New York City resident. But we should keep in mind that the bar was low here. I spent my entire life living on Staten Island, and in my education, I heard the word Lenape exactly once when I was in school. I don't think I ever heard of the existence of the mastodon on Staten Island at all. And the attention that our staff gave to this site is perhaps the most attention that Indigenous people's presence on Staten Island has ever had. And that is a sad thing because it is the island as a whole is a source of much deeper history than the past 350 or so years. There are layers and layers of history, and we've ignored that first, the largest part of that 8,000 years. Setting all that aside, I hope that the designation of this site will attract attention and visitorship, not just to the site for the reason this is being designated now, but because of the reason that it has had such a strong role in history during that first 8,000 years, and more recently during the Revolutionary War. It is an incredibly photogenic site, and its topography, its geography, and that photogenic nature are the reason why it was chosen for the burial ground in the first place, and it's the reason that the conference house and the Biddle House were there in the second place. It really is all about where it is, and the experience of that site is something that I hope that New Yorkers will, outside of Staten Island, will actually appreciate and will be attracted to as a result of this designation.
Agreed. Thank you for those comments. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I just want to echo what your comment, as well as the poignant comments by Commissioner Gustafson. As Kay was explaining how the name came about and the research history, it sort of remind me why we're here, because I'm sure many of you read the book, The Island at the Center of the World, which is Manhattan. And where I came from, Hong Kong, it's actually, this name could easily be applied to the island of Hong Kong, which is why pirates love to hold it, because it's shelter from the wind, protected from the storm. And it's thanks to these natural resources that gave rise to these great cities around the world. And it's also, in a way, reflective of why it's taken us all these years to finally recognize the contribution. I believe the history goes back earlier than 6,000 years. This is just the 6,000 year period. We believe it to be almost twice as large. So I had, again, thank the commission as well as the staff for this extensive research, and hopefully many more to come.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so I would love if we could move forward with the vote on this one. Commissioner Gustafson, would you make the motion?
Certainly. I move that the Landmarks Preservation Commission designate the Akawahung Menahanung Island Protected from the Wind Archaeological Site, Conference House Park, 298 Satterlee Street, also known as 298 to 300 Satterlee Street, Borough of Staten Island, as a New York City landmark because of its special character and special historical and aesthetic interest and value as part of the development, heritage, and cultural characteristics of the city, state, and nation, as set forth in the designation report for LP 2648, dated June 22nd, 2021. I also move that Borough of Staten Island Tax Map Block 7857, Lot 1, in part, be designated as its landmark site, as described in the designation report and illustrated in the attached map.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Our newest individual landmark and our wonderful, inclusive representation today in both designations. I'm so pleased with both. And then again, I want to thank, as always, for her rigor and leadership in the research department, and really delighted that we're able to recognize the full history of New York City through these designations. So thank you all, and thank you, commissioners, for your support. And with that, we will move to our Preservation Department public meeting agenda. Commissioner Lutfi, did you want to add something before we move?
I did want to add something. I just wanted to wait for the designation to happen. These past couple of months, and all of the commissioners have been saying it, have been amazing in terms of the designations that we have been making. I want to thank you and the staff. Thank you, Kate, and your team. But if you think about it, the designations today have been end caps on this period of time that goes back to the very, very roots of our nation, indigenous people, right down to archaeology and tribal nations. And they've been followed through by these incredible designations, 75th Avenue, that building that is all about organizations focused on equality and social justice, the Darnsbrook Square, the New York Public Library Harlem branch, all of these critical in terms of the contributions of organizations and African Americans to the history and culture of our city and the foundations of what this democracy is based on, then the Hollywood Iglesia Santa Cruz Church, Hispanics, and then finally the Kimlau War Memorial, you know, the patriotic contributions of Asian Americans who fought for what this country is all about and gave their lives. I cannot tell you how important this is. I know you know, but how meaningful it's been to me, and what an important axe it is to capturing these significant buildings, institutions, sites, and contributions to the landscape of the city. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those really eloquent and moving words. And you know, we are 100% committed to this work. We're so grateful for all of your support and engagement, and hearing those words just sort of reaffirms our commitment. And I think it just, you know, continues to give us strength and our sense of purpose. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. Okay. Okay, and we'll now move to the Preservation Department public meeting agenda.
Hey, thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. We're going to start today's Preservation Department agenda with 2 public meeting items. The first is public meeting item number 1, LPC 21-06891, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1404, Lot 59, 130 East 70th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. This is an Italianate Second Empire style row house designed by John Sexton and built in 1869. The application is to reclad the facade. The staff will do an introduction for the revised proposal, and then the applicant will speak about the design choices that were made after we open the proceedings.
Sorry, why don't we go ahead and open the proceedings now so it can be a seamless transition. So Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so after the applicants, after the staff introduces the project, the applicants may speak.
Hey, good morning, Commissioners. Abby Harlebut, Preservation staff. This application is for work at the street facade at 130 East 70th Street, located on the south side of East 70th Street between Lexington and Park Avenues in the Upper East Side Historic District. For your reference, these are the 1980s and 1940s tax photographs documenting that the building was stripped prior to the 1980s. This is the condition today. And this shows the building in its context and its former row, which has been largely altered. So as Corey mentioned, the application was originally heard last month. At that hearing, the commissioners present expressed a general consensus of support for the sandstone veneer and the proposed treatment of the window surrounds at the upper 2 levels. The commissioners expressed concerns regarding the proposed design of the parlor floor level and requested that the applicant explore a more restorative approach. So the applicants have addressed these concerns by proposing to restore the keystone elements and decorative moldings around the windows at the basement level, eliminating the recessed masonry joints at the upper floors, recreating inscribed panels below the parlor floor windows here, and retaining the door and transom at the parlor floor, all matching the documentation shown in the 40s tax photograph. So in addition, the applicants are now proposing window surrounds at the parlor floor that match the details of the upper floors. And they have refined the entrance surround to include a detailed arch surround with a keystone and inset panels above the entrance infill. And if you have any questions, the architect is here to answer them.
Okay, does the architect want to speak a little bit before we do questions, or should we just go into questions?
What I'd like to do is just address once again the key elements that we've changed on this page 5, and I think then we can go from there.
Okay, can you just before you begin state your name for the record?
Rita Marks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did you open the proceedings?
Yes, we did that.
Okay, so I'm just going to go through the list, and I'll potentially be repeating what Abby had addressed, but I'm going to do it one more time. We removed the reveals between the stones above the line of the water table. They are now stone joints. The panels below the parlor floor windows now refer to the original inscribed panels. The pattern of the reveals on the garden level now resemble the tax ID photo. We were using a 1-inch high by 3/4 inch deep reveal and a 4-inch thick stone. The front door, entry door, is a reproduction added in 2006 renovation that will remain, as well as a lunette window. The treatment around the entry door is a way to frame the opening and can be added to again incrementally in the future if one chose the path toward full restoration. The iron cap would be black. It was originally proposed as stainless steel. The window casings and the sills refer in detail to number 136, which is the remaining Sexton building at Lexington Avenue. Lastly, the cornice will remain brown, which is the color of the facade. The natural gas lantern above the entry door and the bluestone areaway and sidewalk material was favorably received at the last hearing, and of course that will remain. That's what I'd like to address. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions for either the staff or either for Abby or the applicant? Yes, Commissioner Holford Smith.
So I just want to clarify that the parlor floor window surrounds are basically the base of the pediment, which could be added in the future.
Yeah.
And the same is true of the door. Basically, it's the base of the larger surround.
Yeah, where our strategies that can be added to later. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. So why don't we then, I'm going to start to request to unmute all of you and we can begin our discussion if there are no other questions. So as Abby presented, this is a building that had been altered over the years with the removal of features and fabric, and the proposal is to sort of return it to a more historic appearance. And as we saw last time, the applicants were not taking their design cues directly from the historic condition, but from other buildings that are similar age and style and have had similar alterations. And at that time, the commission asked the applicant to look at a more restorative approach that was more that would allow for at some point a full restoration, if not in the proposal. And rather than looking at another similar building that may or may not have as much direct relationship to the appearance of this building. And so we've seen that they've made many changes today to the details. So why don't we begin our discussion? Commissioner Holford Smith, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think that the applicant's been very responsive, and this is an overall improvement. Looks like the detailing now matches the historic photo that we have, and as they clarified, could be further restorative elements could be added to actually make it match with the pediments on the parlor floor. So I think given those changes, I find this appropriate and can approve it.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum.
I guess I'm a little less persuaded than Anne was. I look at the historic tax photo and I see a panel above the windows before you even get to the pediment that has some kind of decorative element in it. And I see a very Victorian kind of pediment above the entry that is I can't see how one could marry those details to what is shown here. However, I take the applicant at their word that their intention is to do a restorative project minus the actual pediments, which I find peculiar, but I guess is better than not. So I would ask them to work with staff on those details such that the fabric as it is left after the work is done is in fact restorative minus the actual pediments.
Okay.
If I could just jump in for a second there, because I think we need to clarify. The historic door surrounding hood had some pretty robust brackets, a deeper projection, not just the pediment. So it's not as simple as just being able to add something. They'd actually have to remove, I think, what they're showing as lintels on the windows.
Well, that's a good point, Corey. And the fact is that their statement may be true in regards to the windows on the parlor level, but I don't think it's true in regards to the entry at all. You could theoretically create a surround that could accommodate those brackets at a later time, which I don't think anyone here thinks will ever happen. But it's certainly not the design that's there now.
Okay. And Commissioner Goldblum, I wonder, does it, considering the building has been altered over the years, and this is sort of incrementally getting better, and that it's no longer part of a row where you would see that certain details don't match other buildings in the row, do you still feel it really needs to be a full restoration and not just an interpretation of it?
I think that answer is the answer is for me that I'm recalling our conversation last time, where the architect's choice to do a precise historicist facade that in no way indicates its interpretation-ness, rather seeks to portray the building as in its original state from the 1880s. I think that therefore it is not an interpretation. I think it's a redesign. And I think it's no different than when we have historic evidence and you're proposing a restoration that you would seek to follow the evidence. This is not an interpretation. It's a, you know, there's nothing about this that's signaling to anyone but us 12 people around the table that you know, with our picture in hand, that this is anything but a faithful restoration. So I don't think that it really apply, that those kind of standards that we have in other cases apply here.
Okay. All right. I guess it's just that I was thinking that for me, in a building that's no longer part of a row, we have approved alterations that are in keeping with the age and style that don't necessarily match the historic condition. And we've done that at other buildings. And so that's why I wondered if there might be some flexibility.
Well, I mean, I think part of my inflexibility on it, and I certainly understand it if others feel otherwise, is that this is not, often when we see applications to do partial restoration, the partiality of the restoration is often budgetary in nature, right? They don't want to restore the stoop because the stoop's going to cost X tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so, you know, we can't make you put back something that's already been removed. Or if there's some condition where the codes don't allow for the original restoration. I mean, this is a case where historic materials are being used in the finest possible way, where there's no real likelihood that after this work is done, that further modifications will be made by a more well-endowed owner to correct the situation. This isn't a placeholder. And I guess in thinking about those other ones, I always viewed them as placeholders on the path to the right job.
Yeah, although sometimes they had openings in entirely different locations.
No, I certainly would understand if others did not feel
right.
I do.
Great. And I think that the proposal was, as originally presented, was not presented as a restoration, more as something that was in keeping with the district, and they've tried to move it more toward a more restorative approach, looking to some of the historic details of this building at our direction. And so I guess once you go there, your feeling is you should kind of go the whole way. Okay, Commissioner Devonshire.
I feel as if they've responded to our requests from the last hearing, and I can approve it.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Chen.
I'm in agreement with Commissioner Devonshire at N as well.
Okay, Commissioner Bland.
Yeah, I'm fine with what they've done. It's been responsive to our comments, and I think it's appropriate now.
Okay. Commissioner Lutfi.
Yeah, I feel that they've been responsive to our input, and they have taken the right direction, and it works.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson.
I could approve this effort.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Michael number 2.
Okay. And Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Yes, I think they are not so much moving in the right direction, but within a kind of a sympathetic realm or spectrum, meaning that the Second Empire would have included pediments and not. I mean, I think that there was some kind of, it's a broader style, if in fact that's the one we want to attribute here. So I think that this is appropriate.
Okay. Okay, so I think we have a consensus here. Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you make a motion?
Yes. In the matter of LPC 2106891, 130 East 70th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. An Italianate Second Empire style row house designed by John Sexton and built in 1869. The application is to reclad the facade. I note that the building's scale and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper East Side Historic District. I also note that the original masonry cladding of the facade was stripped and resurfaced using an untinted cementitious stucco and painted prior to the designation of the historic district. I recommend approval, finding that the original brownstone cladding was stripped and stuccoed over. Therefore, the work will not damage or destroy any intact architectural features. That the building is not part of a unified row. Therefore, the alterations to the plane of the facade and cladding of the stoop will not diminish the unified streetscape. That replacing the stucco facade with sandstone will elevate the material palette of the building while recalling the building's original cladding material and color palette. That the new sandstone cladding at the facade and stoop will be in keeping with the historic brownstone cladding in terms of design, details, texture, and color. That there is a history of alterations to facades in this historic district, which changed the character and style of row houses to more stripped, classicized townhouses, and the proposed simplified window and door enfranements at the parlor floor is in keeping with that tradition. That the proposed details of the parlor floor entrance surrounds will help return the building closer to its historic appearance without precluding the full restoration of the building in the future. That the change from pedimented window and door surrounds to a simplified design will not diminish the building's relationship to its neighbors on the block and will be consistent with parlor floors at buildings of this type and age in terms of placement, proportions, profiles, details, and finish. That the proposed window, lintels, and sills of the basement, second and third floors will restore missing architectural features, and that the work will not diminish the special architectural character of the building or the historic district.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
I second the motion.
All right, thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Nay.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 9 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved. Thank you. And we will-
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to the next public meeting item.
Okay, we'll go to public meeting item number 2, LPC 19-39708, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1404, Lot 147, 160 East 70th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. This is a row house originally designed in the Italianate style by William McNamara, built in 1872 to 74, redesigned with neoclassical style elements by Wallace McCrae in 1925, and then altered by Thomas Larache in 1961. And the application is to redesign the front facade and alter the areaway. This was last presented at the public hearing of February 4th, 2020, and no action was taken at that time. And please note that when last presented, the commissioners expressed a consensus of support for redesigning the facade, but had concerns about the mix of Italianate and classical stylistic influences in the proposed design being incompatible, and encouraged the applicants to explore a more stylistically cohesive design. So the applicants have restudied the proposal and will present their revisions after we open the proceedings.
Okay, and we'll go ahead and do that now while before we get started. So Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
I so second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so the applicants may begin speaking after the staff introduces the project.
We're going to go right to the applicant in this case.
Oh, okay.
I did the intro.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Bill Higgins of Higgins Quaysbarth, and we have been consulting with the architects and the project team in order to help to revise the design for the facade to respond to the Commissioner's comments at the public hearing. As we have looked closely at the possibilities for redesign and the appropriateness of a stylistic language that incorporates the limestone as a material, which I believe is also part of the Commissioner's comments, your suggestion of Beaux-Arts as a possible stylistic inspiration has really made a lot of sense to us. And I'd like to go through the changes to the proposed facade design and also some of the observations about Beaux-Arts buildings and facades that led us to these proposals. Next. So just the location again, south side of East 70th Street between Lexington and 3rd. Next. And the immediate site plan and the existing conditions photograph. Again, this was an 1870s building that was reclad in the 1920s, and that recladding was then what appears to be significantly modified in the early 1960s. So it is the building with the white pilastered enframement on the entry. Next. These are the designation photos from 1981 showing the building with its combination of 20s and 60s alterations. Next. And just general context surrounded with the orange broken line is the building with views of both the south and the north sides of the streets. Again, what we are proposing is a design that is inspired by Beaux-Arts facade designs, and wanted to make the point that on both sides of this block, there are quite a few Beaux-Arts style buildings facades and quite a extensive use of limestone as a material. And we propose to follow that approach. So these three rendered elevations, the existing elevation on the left and the proposal at the last public hearing last year, which we're calling neoclassical. And then on the right is our proposal, which moves in again more in the direction of the Beaux-Arts, following the Commissioner's general comments and suggestions. Again, the basic, as Corey said, the basic sort of direction that we understood from the Commission was that it is appropriate to replace this facade. But the idea is that if the proposal is for limestone, as it is, to use a stylistic language that for which limestone is a more appropriate and recognized material. Next. So just a little bit of our thinking. Are we missing one? Did we skip two? No. Okay. So we looked at nearby facades in order to get a sense of the basic language of Beaux-Arts facades, and we observed a number of things. First of all, the common use of of usually limestone, a light color palette for the facades. A strong emphasis on the base of the building, which I think we might see in the next slide in just a second. Then an emphasis on the parlor floor or piano nobile level above the base, where that usually has not only an emphasis in terms of the size of the openings and the ornamental enframelments, but also there's usually a connection to the ground floor, so that there's a sort of extended base where there's a distinction between the ground floor and the piano nobile, but also there's a relation between them at the time. There is a more sort of robust three-dimensional approach to enframelments and moldings and ornament in general, so that there is that stronger sort of sculptural character to the facade. The window, unlike the typical row house, the windows on the upper floors of the Beaux-Arts buildings usually have a sense of being grouped together rather than sort of being evenly spaced across the facade. So there's a strong sense of the windows as a group, usually of three, being pierced in a strongly red masonry plane. There are usually secondary string courses between the base and the main cornice, and then the main cornice itself is usually strongly modeled and is often topped with a balustrade. Next. So here's the proposal as we expressed it in a rendering, where we tried to take a number of those characteristics and incorporate them into our facade design. To start from the bottom, there is by the way, an existing areaway in this building as it stands. And we are proposing that areaway, but extended by about 2 feet. It stands still in a sort of transitional relationship to the areaways of the 2 flanking buildings as it does now, just pushed out by about 2 feet, so that there's a more usable entry below grade. Ornamental ironwork in the Beaux-Arts style. A strong sense of rustication on both the base and the piano nobile level, again to have that sense of the building, sort of the facade firmly rooted in the ground, and a relationship between the first 2 stories. There's usually in Beaux-Arts facades a strong central emphasis on the entrance, usually a strong enfrainment, and often an ornamental element, a keystone or a cartouche that marks the center of the building, with smaller, sort of clearly secondary openings flanking the main entry. Then a taller size and a more ornamental enfrainment at the piano nobile level, the grouped windows on the 2 floors above, the secondary but still strongly modeled cornice or string course to the top floor, and then a distinction between the top floor and the 2 below, and the cornice with the balustrade above. So we feel that this is following much more closely that sort of Beaux-Arts facade composition and materials. Next. So just a few details to give a sense. What we are aiming for here is not a sort of overly simplified, abstracted kind of approach. While this isn't, sort of full-blown École de Beaux-Arts detail, it really is meant to be pretty thoroughly detailed in the classical language. Next. Ornamental cartouche proposed above the main entry. Next. And a sketch of the enfrainment for the piano nobile, again all in limestone with pilasters and a full classical entablature above. Next. Just to give you a sense of the sort of the sense of depth and projection, the top plan is of the existing exterior, which is provides approximately 6 inches between the facade, farthest projection of the facade plane, and the window glass, and below, excuse me, is the proposed one, which is about 1 foot 7 inches from the farthest projection of the cornice to the glass line. So again, we're aiming for a pretty strong projection recession, a deep facade. Next. And just some, we're sort of skipping around here, my apologies. Some of the other sort of precedents that we had been thinking about, again, buildings close by and in the district. This gives us a sense on the left of both the central entry and the strongly articulated piano nobile above, and then again on the right, these 3 central entries, ornamental ironwork, secondary windows, emphasis on the sort of rootedness of the facade, with a use of rustication in most cases. Next. And these are comparative elevations, the existing on the left, taken both from beyond the areaway and from inside the areaway, and hopefully the elevations on the right will make it clear again that we are aiming for a Beaux-Arts language. Next. And this shows existing conditions. The major idea here is to show that the building now has and will continue to have an areaway, and that it will continue to sort of modulate between the areaways of the 2 buildings that flank it. But as you can see from the previous images, we're planning on extending that areaway across so that the entrance is inside the areaway, and we're also planning to project it out 2 feet, so that there'll be sufficient depth to approach the entry properly and safely. Next. And that's plans showing that proposed areaway. And a little more of an idea, hopefully, with this rendering of the base of the building on the left. Next. And so in summary, that is what we're proposing. We very much hope that our changes, which we think have been quite extensive, respond to the commissioner's comments and now provide an appropriate limestone facade in a compatible and appropriate architectural language. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I know we have one question at least. Commissioner Devonshire, please go ahead.
Thanks, Sarah. Bill, our firm has worked on several Beaux-Arts buildings in New York City, and they've all had multi-light sash. Yours have single light sash. Can you give us some examples that you've seen?
Yeah, well, there are some. We should have concentrated more on these. My apologies, but you certainly find, particularly above the piano nobile, you do find examples. I wouldn't say it's the majority, but you do find examples of 1/1 window sash on the upper floors, and on the piano nobile level. You certainly do find transoms frequently, but there are cases where there are not, and in the interest of light and openness, we're proposing not to have muntins or transoms in this case. And it's, again, although I would say it's not the most common by any means situation with Beaux-Arts facades, it is done. You do find it, and we feel it's within the spectrum.
Thanks.
Other questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson.
I have a question about proportion. It seems to me, looking at this picture, that the entry is sunken down. The proportion of the piano nobile, the second and third floor, it's odd. And then the question I do have, because I can accept this, is the idea of going down to an entrance and the proportion of it. I don't know. It seems odd to me, the proportion. I mean, I don't know if you agree or disagree.
Thank you for that comment, Commissioner. Could you go back to the elevations showing the base? Yeah. No, the next one. Oh no, that one's good. I'm sorry. So kind of an obvious statement, but the image you were talking about is, of course, in elevation, true elevation, and so it's more like the view, the bottom view on the right. And in actuality, you know, what the real proportions are what you're seeing inside the areaway in the elevation on top. And our feeling is, or my feeling is, that in sort of real experience, as you're walking by the building, you're going to, you know, sense that and see that there's an areaway below, and that the openings relate to the full height of the areaway, and in that sense are much more in proportion with the piano nobile.
But my question is, in typical Beaux-Arts buildings, you see the elevation from across the street, they're symmetrical. I mean, this is a different interpretation of that perception. But it's just, you know, it's fine. It's okay.
Thank you.
And just following up on Commissioner Jefferson's question, I think, you know, what happened on the Upper East Side is 19th century brownstones that had that had stoops were altered in the early 20th century, and sometimes they just stripped the facade or redesigned portions of the facade. And sometimes they built out an entirely new facade and pulled it forward. And in those cases, they were able to change floor levels, and you have an entrance sort of at grade and you can see the full proportion. But sometimes when those facades are made in the original plane and the floor levels aren't changing, you do see the entrance partially below grade. And I guess, Bill, are there other examples of the sort of Beaux-Arts or other sort of neoclassical buildings that you can show that have retained the sort of partial basement entry?
You do see those, and there are some in the examples that we showed where there are areaways where you're approaching the entry below grade. Again, you find the whole spectrum of approaches in the Beaux-Arts, but you certainly do find examples where you're approaching the entry below grade.
Great. Okay. Other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions. And actually, I want to just talk to our Director of Community and Intergovernmental Affairs, Anthony Fabre. Did we receive any written comments on this revised proposal since it was posted on the website?
Sorry about that. Yes, we did receive comments from Friends of the Upper East Side.
Right, and I believe we did a prior item as well, and those were
yes, those were shared with the commission.
Those were shared with the commission prior to today. Okay. All right. So I'm just moving to unmute all of you so we can begin our discussion. And I'll, Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make a motion to? I guess we don't have to close the hearing because we opened only the proceedings, so we can begin our discussion. Okay. All right. So we have this building, another building on East 70th Street that was altered over time. It originally was a brownstone row house with a stoop, and altered in the early 20th century with the removal of the stoop, the sort of shaving the detail, and even later alterations with the windows at the top floors. So it's had many layers of alterations, and the proposal is to redesign it to be in keeping with the many versions of the Beaux-Arts style facades elsewhere in the Upper East Side Historic District. And I think that as Corey and the applicant, Bill Higgins, have described, this was a direction the commissioners were comfortable with, but had concerns about the stylistic details and choices being made, sort of a combination of features. So why don't we begin our discussion? Commissioner Bland, would you like to start this one?
I would, thank you. I always enjoy Bill's very erudite presentations, as I'm sure we all do. But I will say in this case, I'm less doctrinaire, and my belief is that the eclectic mix on the Upper East Side townhouses particularly are such that we have so much variety. For me, whether this is classical or Beaux-Arts is a little less important to me than the fact that what's being proposed now is simply an interesting design. I think the proportions and interest of each floor, and then the whole ensemble, all 4 levels, 5 levels, is simply just interesting as a design of various elements, as opposed to the rather generic approach that we saw before. So for me, again, I just want to emphasize, I don't really care whether it's classical or Beaux-Arts, or even how that might be defined in this case. But what's being shown to us here, which I will certainly think is very approvable and will vote to approve, is simply an interesting design, and I thank Bill for providing it.
Thank you, Commissioner Leffy.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the changes that were made are very appropriate, and this is like a very well done, cohesive design that not only holds together well, but speaks to the classically inspired architecture on the street. Some of, a lot of it new. I don't have a problem with the windows not having muttons in them, and I think it's a good project. I can support it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I think it's an interesting project, but I think the proportions are off from my point of view. A, and B. So I think the muttons will add to it because it gives it a secondary level of richness and shadow. So I would recommend just kind of continue working on it.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, it's appropriate as is.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of difficulty with it, given our discussion in the previous application. I mean, if the criteria is there are lots of different styles-ish in the Upper East Side Historic District, and you can pick one and try to get close to it, and if that's the criteria and it's acceptable as a criteria, then I suppose this is appropriate. But it has to be said that this is a completely brand new facade building that does not even attempt to relate, let alone restore, what's currently there, even if in its kind of bare version. So I just have it's that to me is just strange, given the fact that we spent a good amount of time discussing the pediments on the previous application. So I'm a little confused about it, but again, if the criteria is you can pick a style on the Upper East Side and go ahead and do anything different, then it's appropriate.
And I think that the question about when you do that really depends on what's existing and the level of alterations that have happened to the building. And if it no longer retains original features, or in this particular district, early 20th century significant features, and no longer has meaning to either of those periods, then the commission has approved new designs. I think in the previous application, perhaps that building had a little bit more of its original character than this one currently does, or that may be how some people have been thinking about it. Okay. Commissioner Halford-Smith.
I can find this appropriate. I think understanding that it's not trying to replicate something that was there before, it was basically a new building. My only concern is I feel the windows are not appropriate, as certainly not on the parlor floor. I think they need to be perhaps casements with transoms or some kind of multi-light window. I feel like that is a very strange dichotomy between large expanses of glass in this design. So I think they need to restudy the window fenestration.
Okay. Commissioner Goldblum?
Yeah, I think that I think the concept of this is appropriate because the original facade is so heavily altered, and because this is frankly not trying to be something old. This is clearly something that's quite new. And this kind of facade falls into the almost the expected kind of renovations that one sees on the Upper East Side in historic districts. I agree with Anne, though, that piano nobile proportions or the windows are off. I would suggest that they work with staff as well on the proportions of the relationship between the entry portal and the piano nobile expression with the four pilasters. There's something just a little bit off about that. And when you're doing kind of straight classical stuff, as they are suggesting to do, that kind of thing just makes it look curdled and off. So, but I think it's easily fixed, especially if you're going to do as Anne suggested and look at those windows. Just I've never seen a situation where pilasters sit on the kind of cantilevered outriggers of a cornice. It's just a very unusual detail, but it's very minor and it can be fixed with staff.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
I think because it's something else, it's something new, it's approvable. I agree with the discussion about the windows on the piano nobile. I think even introducing transoms on those would make them look much less Orphan Annie and inappropriate.
Okay, and Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I agree with the comments. I think that it's approvable, and if the details on the piano nobile may need a little bit of articulation or whatever needs to be done to work with staff, I'm sure they can take care of it.
Okay. All right, great. So I think we've been all the way around. So, and I agree with all of the comments. So I'll go ahead and make this motion. Just pull it up. Excuse me. Okay. In the matter of docket number 19-39708, 160 East 70th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District, a row house originally designed in the Italianate style by William McNamara and built in 1872-74, redesigned with neoclassical style elements by Wallace McCrae in 1925, and altered by Thomas Laresh in 1961. This is an application to redesign the front facade and alter the areaway. And I recommend approval, finding that the character-defining features of the house's original Italianate style were lost prior to the designation of the historic district. Therefore, the proposed work will not eliminate intact original facade features or diminish the unity of the row, that the existing early 20th century alterations are not unique or representative of exceptional details or craftsmanship. Therefore, the work will not eliminate a significant later alteration, that the proposed work is in keeping with the long tradition within the Upper East Side Historic District of the creation of classically inspired facades, that the proposed compositional organization, proportions, material, finishes, and level and type of ornamentation will help form a unified design, recalling the Beaux-Arts style and character of houses within the historic district, that the presence of a house modeled on Beaux-Arts style elements will be compatible with the streetscape, which features houses of varied style, including some with classical designs and limestone cladding, that the placement and size and ornamentation of the facade components will help support a hierarchy and unity of design consistent with the Beaux-Arts style, that the proposed double hung windows, paneled entrance door, and decorative ironwork will be in keeping with infill and ironwork historically found at Beaux-Arts style houses in terms of configuration, materials, details, and finishes, that the increased depth of the areaway will be modest and compatible with the style of the house, and that the areaway walls, railings, and gate will be typical in placement and consistent with neighboring fences in terms of height, helping them to harmonize with the streetscape. However, we find that the second floor windows at the piano nobile lack a level of articulation and proportion that are keeping with the Beaux-Arts style, and are not well integrated into the overall design, and therefore recommend that the applicant continue to work with the staff to restudy the piano nobile proportions and fenestration pattern to provide articulation and to incorporate it into the design overall. Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
I second the motion.
Okay, thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire. Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so that's approved with the continued restudy of the piano nobile with the staff, piano nobile windows with the staff. And we'll move to our public hearing agenda now.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Okay, the first public hearing item is item number 1, LPC 21-09533, application for a binding report. This is in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 2088, Lot 1, Fort Greene Park in the Fort Greene Historic District. This is a 19th century park built in 1840 and altered in 1866 to 1873 to designs by Olmsted and Vaux, and in 1906 to 1909 to designs by McKim, Mead and White. And the application is to install barrier-free access pathways.
Commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Hi, my name is Paul Kidanakis from New York City Parks and Recreation. Trying to move this. Here we go. Okay, hi. Paul Kidanakis, New York City Parks and Recreation. I'm joined by my colleagues Dennis Flynn, Sybil Young, David Cuff, and Christopher Surratt to present the commission our proposal for the West Park landscape in Fort Greene Park. An image of a portion of that is on your screen right now. Our project goals are to reconstruct the existing asphalt paths, reintroduce an historic connection to the Upper Monument Plaza, improve accessibility and connectivity in the park, improve drainage by incorporating green infrastructure and mitigating erosion issues throughout. Fort Greene Park is a big hill with significant topography, which poses a challenge for ADA compliance and drainage throughout the park. The total budget is $3.75 million and it's approximately 3 acres. It is in the Fort Greene section of Brooklyn. The entire area is in the Landmark District. Fort Greene Park is a 30-acre park originally designed by Olmsted and Vaux in the 1860s. It's comprised of 2/3 distinct areas. The Lower Plaza area and the Upper Monument are connected. It's the more formal landscape, areas for park patrons to commingle. And then we have the pastoral landscape, which is the majority of the park. I'll also mention that at the top of the hill, there is the Prison Ship Martyrs Monument designed by McKim, Mead and White, which is a 145-foot tall Doric column in dedication to 11,500 soldiers who died during the Revolutionary War in prison ships of the British. I'd like to remind everyone that Fort Greene Park is a big hill. You'll see this topographical map in a few slides. The lighter the color, the higher you are in elevation. The memorial is placed at the top of the hill, and there is approximately a 70-foot difference between the high point of the park and the low point of the park. The area that we're speaking about today is the West Park landscape, which is outlined in blue. There are 3 main parts to this project. One is ADA compliance. As I said, that is one of our goals is to make Fort Greene Park as ADA compliant as we possibly can, and it is a challenge. Connectivity, to connect the lower portion of the park with the upper monument, and of course to deal with erosion and stormwater issues. I'll mention that this area in Fort Greene Park is probably the worst in regards to stormwater management and erosion problems. A few images of the area. This one in particular really shows the issue that we have here. We have steep slopes where the runoff continues down the hill and oftentimes ends up in the tennis court area. You can see scouring of edges and asphalt. The park management has actually placed in some barriers to prevent some of the stormwater from going into the tennis courts, and some additional barriers to stop some of the erosion and sedimentation that's happening in the park. There has been a desire line for many, many years since paths were removed to get to the top of the monument, to the point where the park staff has placed this temporary path. This is actually the location where we will be proposing part of our new path. And you can see why that is. As opposed to walking up a very steep hill, park patrons tend to take the gentler slope in order to access the upper portion of the park, which is in this location here. And this is the area that we will be taking advantage of in order to create an ADA compliant accessible path. An image looking to the east. This is a typical condition where you see erosion coming down the slope and sediment being expelled onto park paths. An image from higher up on the hill, looking down towards the tennis courts, you see puddles and erosion, and you also see the temporary path. And on the extreme right is the western wing of the monument where we will be connecting to in this proposal. This is a location, and you'll see a little bit later on, where we are connecting to the upper monument area. And then this is the western wing of the monument. Now, we're not doing any work to the western wing, though we hope to do some work in the future as it does need it. But I do draw your attention to these two entrances here. There once was a path that connected to these entrances, and we are reconnecting to these entrances. This entrance right here is actually this entrance on the far upper portion of this image over here. This is the wing of the monument. This image really shows the issue that we have. We have gullies forming, erosion happening, and stormwater problems. So the introduction of the new path will satisfy the three criteria, which is accessibility, the reconnection to the upper monument, along with incorporating the infrastructure that we need to deal with the stormwater problems and erosion problems that we have in the park. Some historical background, remembering that the middle of the park is the highest point and the lower portions are along the perimeter. This is the original Olmsted and Vaux plan from 1867. I draw your attention to the circulation system, and you can see how the circulation is, the whole park is very well connected in regards to circulation. In 1908, when McKim White put in the monument and the memorial, much of the original Olmsted circulation system remained intact. In the 1930s, Gilmore Clark came in and added the wings to the monument, along with some topographical alterations that were made, and formalized the path system throughout the park. However, the park was still well connected in various areas via the wings of the monument. In the 1970s, much of what Gilmore Clark had done was removed. And this area here, which you'll see in a minute, is the base of the Olmsted and Vaux circulation system. The problem with this area is that only this location now is connected to the upper portion of the park, leaving a good portion of the park inaccessible via a formal route, a path route up to the monument. The orange is the current configuration and the white is the original Olmsted and Vaux configuration. You can see the comparison here. In this case, the orange is the current configuration and the white is the Gilmore Clark configuration. So again, we have our topographical map, which shows how we created the general shape, utilizing existing topography to meet ADA compliance to get folks from this path in this location and this path in this location up to the western wing and the upper portion of the monument for better connectivity and accessibility, again, using the existing topography. And you can see our path overlaid onto the original Olmsted and Vaux plan. To recreate the original plan from Olmsted and Vaux is not exactly feasible, and for two reasons. One, the original area on the upper portion of the park has been significantly changed. And second, again, the topography has since been changed, and we would have to do some major recontouring of the landscape, which would be very infeasible at this point. And here it is overlaid onto the 1936 Gilmore-Clark circulation system. So our diagram, the yellow represents a replacement in kind, generally replacing the asphalt, adding in a granite block edge with a reveal, which is a detail we've been using throughout the park. And then we have the orange, which is the new section. Now, I draw your attention to the western wing and remembering that we had the two existing entrances. So we bring a park patron up to the western wing. Then we have this red bar, which represents several stairs, 5 steps, I believe it is, which would not allow a patron in a wheelchair to access the upper monument. So taking advantage of the existing entrance on the other side to create this segment, which attaches to the upper monument plaza, would enable a park patron in a wheelchair with other mobility problems to access the upper monument area. Again, in line with our topography, this area is this area that is represented here, and you can see how much gentler the slope is moving up this area into the park for our new path. As I said, in conjunction with accessibility and connectivity, the new path system, along with this very simple detail of the granite block edge with the reveal, enables us to manage the various watersheds that we have. Again, I said it earlier on, this is probably the worst location in regards to stormwater management that we have. We have several watersheds that we are now able to direct into by blocking the water with the granite block edge and directing it into various types of green infrastructure like concrete dry wells. So this is the proposed schematic plan. Everything in gray is either reconstructed or a new path. The dotted red line is the granite block with a reveal to help us with the stormwater management. We have new lighting as needed throughout the park, new benches in all the flattish areas in the park, handrail in areas that are required for ADA compliance. And we plan on adding at minimum 25 to 30 new shade trees in this location, countless numbers of ornamentals, and entrance plantings and other plantings in locations where we might need it for slope stabilization, etc. This was a project that was done back in 2015 that most similarly looks like the work that we are doing here. You have the asphalt paths, you have the granite block edging, which you can see over here and here, beautiful plantings, additional lawn, trees, and a lot of infrastructure underground that you don't see in these images. And our site furnishings include the Type B lamppost with Riverside luminaire, our accessible drinking fountain and handrail that we use in our landmark and legacy parks, granite block edging with asphalt, and our settee bench, which is the primary bench that we use throughout the pastoral landscape. And of course, our shade trees will be working with our landscape construction and forestry divisions to include a variety of shade trees, as well as ornamentals, shrubs in select locations, and lawn. That concludes the presentation. I thank you so much for your time and look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? I don't think we have any questions at this time, so we will move to public testimony and we may have questions after that. So if you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and we will start with anyone who signed up first and then move to everyone else. And I'll turn it over to our Executive Director, Lisa Krasavage, to take us through the testimony.
Okay, thank you. First, we have Rosamond Fletcher. Okay, Rosamond, you've been brought in, and you just need to unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you choose.
There you go. Thank you to Chair Carroll, the commissioners, and LPC staff for this hearing, and to New York City Parks for the presentation. My name is Rosamund Fletcher, and I'm Executive Director of the Fort Greene Park Conservancy. Our mission is to preserve and nourish Fort Greene Park as a community resource and as a public space for all New Yorkers for generations to come. And we do this through programming, through maintenance, and through advocacy. Through the years, we have successfully advocated for over $30 million in capital investment in Fort Greene Park, from the restoration of the Prison Ship Martyrs Monument for the 2008 centennial celebration to this current plan. And we now provide over $600,000 annually in direct support, staffing, programs and services for the park, and over 5,000 hours of volunteer time each year. I'd like to begin by stating that the Fort Greene Park Conservancy is committed to building a significant level of consensus within the community for park projects from the outset, and we have a robust process for doing so. This additional scope of work didn't originate directly from the community, and the process has not provided the opportunity for extensive community engagement. But the plan for the western wing of Fort Greene Park Western Landscape does respond to longstanding park issues and to the needs of park users. This is evident in the park's landscape itself, where it's trodden and dirt, and as shown, and also in the responses of our annual park maintenance survey. This phase of work was also outlined in Nancy Owen's studio's study and plan for the phasing of capital work in Fort Greene Park. The primary design components, the new ADA accessible paths to the monument area, follow desire lines that have been inscribed into the hills by park users through the years, and as noted, restore prior paths. We have supported maintenance of a temporary wood chip version of one of these paths that was shown to control stormwater runoff and erosion for a number of years. A new permanent paved path with ADA access would be a significant improvement for the park and community, providing better access to the cultural programming that we provide on the western wing of the monument and to large community events that happen there, like Soul Summit. The proposed drainage improvements in the plans respond to long-standing needs for adequate control of runoff during heavy rainfall, in particular in this area of the park, as was noted. Without it, the gullies form in the hills and they deposit dirt and debris along the paths and the tennis courts. In particular, on the tennis courts, they obstruct play and they contribute to the court's degradation. It was recently resurfaced, and every time this comes onto the courts, it causes problems. We have supported temporary solutions to the runoff in the past, as was shown, using railroad ties and gravel, but these are inadequate, and they also detract from the design of the park. A permanent solution to drainage issues in this area of the park is sorely needed and would greatly benefit park users. For these reasons, the Fort Greene Park Conservancy supports the proposed capital work for the western landscape of Fort Greene Park. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'd just like to remind everybody, if you'd like to speak, whether you've signed up or not, please do raise your hand. And I am working through the list of people that signed up first. So next we'll have Alex Ording. Okay, Alex, just need to unmute yourself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I can keep this really short. We just wanted to echo Rosamund's comment. I'm on the board of the Fort Greene Tennis Association, and we collaborate with parks and with the Park Conservancy to make sure that as many people in our community have access to Fort Greene Park and to tennis in Fort Greene as possible. I don't know if we're able to show additional photos of what happens to the courts when we have drainage problems, but every time there's a big rainstorm, the water runs downhill onto the tennis courts. It carries a lot of dirt and debris with it. And then once the rain stops and the courts start to dry up, they're very muddy, covered in lots of dirt, often unplayable, and require a lot of community resources to clean up, which, as Rosamond mentioned, also impacts the condition of the courts overall, degrades them much more quickly than would otherwise happen. So we just wanted to echo support for improved drainage. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, Alex Ording.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move to somebody else that signed up, Lucy Coteen. And again, I see a couple names that signed up without their hands raised. Please do raise your hand if you'd like to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good afternoon. I would like to read part of a letter that was submitted to you by Enid Braun on behalf of Friends of Fort Greene Park. And before I do that, I just want to say that this hearing is premature, as this proposal is part of the prior Parks Without Borders proposal. But let me just read a section of this letter. Very good letter. Friends of Fort Greene Park respectfully request that you table this item. This proposal is a segment of a much larger $24 million project that encompasses an earlier $10.5 million proposal. Our group, in conjunction with Sierra Club, was part of a successful lawsuit challenging the legality of this proposal in the absence of a full environmental review, including both historic and landscape features of the park. So basically, we are still waiting for the Parks Department to be in compliance with the judge's mandate to perform an environmental review. Sorry. So this is premature. They need to address the first part of the proposal and not segment this aspect of the total $24 million proposal. I'm sorry, I can't, I have to. Anyway, so Friends of Fort Greene Park is waiting for this environmental assessment, and we remain committed to preserving the historic elements of the park. And also, I would like to say we are committed to restoring the 83 mature trees that the Parks Department plans to remove. These trees are healthy, and despite the Parks Department claiming they are not, but the independent arborist, as well as the Parks Department's own forestry report, claims the trees are healthy, and we cannot be removing all these trees. The prior Parks Without Borders proposal claimed they were just doing maintenance, yet it was part of a brand new project and proposal. So we are in agreement with the judge, and we await for the Parks Department to perform. This should be addressed later on. So let's put first things first and table this motion for now and review it later on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, Amy Hecht. I know that you signed up. There we go. See your hand up. Okay, Amy. Just need to unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you choose. I'm going to send a request to unmute yourself.
Hi.
Hi, we can hear you. Please state your name for the record.
Okay, I'm Amy Hecht. I'm representing Fort Greene Pups. Pups is the local community dog owner group. We've been around in Fort Greene Park for about 20 years now, and we consider ourselves stewards of the park. We're the park's most regular users. Pups is in support of the ongoing park improvements in general, and this one in particular, so long as the proposed work does not result in less space for dog owners and other park users. And that's really all I have to say for testimony.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, next we have Sandy. Okay, Sandy, I've brought you in. You just need to unmute yourself and please state your full name for the record.
Thank you kindly. You can hear me. I start the video. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Please state your name for the record.
Thank you. I'm Sandy Rayburn, president of Preserve Our Brooklyn Neighborhoods, and we are in opposition to the park's proposal. This is more than merely about runoff. It's about killing trees en masse and a failure of trust of the Department of Parks. I'm testifying today to remind you that the community and users of Fort Greene Park had every reason to be skeptical of the New York City Department of Parks plan and their original Parks Without Borders proposal. We were justified in our concern about the impending evisceration of 83 healthy, mature trees, which the Parks Department originally alleged were sick. Actually, no, they weren't. An independent, renowned arborist's evaluation, as well as the Parks Department own forestry report, showed that the Parks Department was lying and was one of the bases for the judge to rule in a lawsuit against the city that the department had to go through a thorough environmental review prior to any hacking of trees. That requirement remains open and is troublesome. The Friends of Fort Greene Park are once again requesting answers, once again filing 13 FOIA requests for answers. They remain unanswered. We urgently request that you delay any determination. In your role as stewards of this historic park, we ask that you not abdicate your responsibility to protect both its legacy and indeed, as private citizens of a globe with encroaching climate change. I'm sorry, would you say that again?
We didn't say anything. I think that was an echo from you.
I'm sorry, then I'll finish the sentence and just a couple of more. So as private citizens of a globe with encroaching climate change, you not rush to judgment before the Department of Parks can come up with some environmental answers well before the harm is done. Finally, what I'd like to say is there's a popular Chinese proverb that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. So we ask, will those majestic tall trees planted by the legendary and revered landscape architects decades ago in their vision for an urban respite be chopped into stumps, discarded as just so much kindling? Will our communities attempt to preserve and honor this grand green space that is Fort Greene Park be ignored in a fast tracking of the Department of Parks, quote, new plan? Will their cavalier disregard of truth be rewarded by this commission? Or will you table it until the people who pay their salaries, New Yorkers, get full and complete answers to our foils? Many thanks for allowing me to speak.
Okay, thank you. And next we have E. Brown, LeBron. Okay, E. Brown, got you in.
Yes, hello.
Please,
You're
please
representing.
state your name for the record.
Oh, sorry, it's Enid Braun. And because Lucy excerpted from the letter from Friends of Fort Greene Park, which was sent to the LPC, and I would hope you would all read it in its full form. But so rather than read it at this point, I want to highlight certain points that perhaps weren't clear. This is indeed a segment, and that is why we're asking you to table the vote for now. What was originally 10.5 million is now 24 million. So while this piece of the 24 million is identified as 3.75 million, you have to understand as a procedural thing, the Parks Department is in fact lopping off small sections. When I asked Marty Marr, Brooklyn Commissioner, if they would be releasing a forestry report, he said no. We had to hire our own arborist and sue in order to get information that is public information. So what we're challenging is the process Parks is going through. And we ask you to just delay your vote until the Parks Department complies with what is actually proper and legal.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I don't see anybody else who has signed up or who has their hand raised.
Okay, thank you. And Anthony, have we received any additional written comments?
So Brooklyn Community Board 2 voted to approve the application as presented, and in addition to the written testimony submitted by people who have already spoken today, we received a written testimony from Protect Our Brooklyn Neighborhoods after the deadline of yesterday afternoon. So unfortunately, that was not shared with commissioners prior to the hearing, but it's added to the record.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'd like to turn back to the Parks Department, and well, actually, first, I would like to turn to our General Counsel, Mark Silverman, and ask, Mark, can you just say a few words speaking to the intersection between the LPC Certificate of Appropriateness or Commission report process, the intersection between our process and the environmental review process?
Sure. I mean, these are two separate laws. The environmental review laws don't directly apply to LPC. We're not a lead agency. We're reviewing this under the landmarks law, and to the extent that the Friends of Fort Greene Park is in litigation with the Parks Department, and there's a ruling that there has been segmentation, which is breaking apart of a uniform project into smaller parts in a way that frustrates the environmental review laws. That's a separate issue. It doesn't concern the LPC's ability or requirement to act under our law. We have an application before us. So they're very separate things. To the extent that we act on this application today and subsequent decisions by a court indicate that the project can't go forward as we've approved it, the Parks Department would come back to us. But there's no requirement under any law that the commission not act under on this application, which is being presented to us pursuant to the landmarks law.
Okay, thank you. And I'd now like to turn to the Parks Department and ask Blake to address some of the comments that we heard in testimony.
I suppose, hi, this is Paul Kitanakis again. I will defer to our Director of Environmental Review, David Cuff, but the main objection seems to be that it's untimely. The ruling stated that we should do an environmental review. We are complying with that, and that the environmental review is underway. And part of that is the incorporation of this additional piece in order to comply. So I'm a little confused by the comments. Maybe David can elaborate, but is our understanding that this piece is in an effort to comply with the environmental review process?
Yes, Paul, that's correct. We have an environmental review. We have a consultant on board. They're preparing an environmental review for all the work that's going on at Fort Greene Park as part of this project, not certain segments, the entire thing. They should have a draft ready for us soon. As our typical process, we would like to see what LPC is determined and include that as part of the environmental review for our project. So, I mean, obviously, whatever LPC decides would weigh very heavily on any kind of decision that we make with regard to impacts. But at this point, the consultant is working on a draft.
Okay, thank you. We do have a question from Commissioner Gustafson. Please go ahead.
Your question is actually for Mark. Setting aside other agencies' responsibilities for the trees, for example, how do you define our responsibility in terms of the removal of trees in this park?
We have authority and jurisdiction to review the removal of trees, and to the extent that we, the commission can review that removal under sort of typical appropriateness standards.
So it's the way, but we're looking at the trees for the general appearance of removing this, removing that. We don't really address whether they're removing trees that are perfectly healthy trees.
Well, we could decide that we don't understand that a particular. Yes, I mean, I guess if you're asking whether, well, to the extent that we believe that trees planted in this particular place are important to the park, its visual and historic context, and we could ask for an explanation as to why they need to be removed, and we, based on that explanation, we could approve or deny that removal.
Okay, so then I have a question for the applicant. How many trees is this part of the proposal going to remove, and what's the justification for removing those trees?
We have done a tree inventory for this location of the park, and our foresters have identified 3 or 4 trees that would be removed based on their condition. There are no removals as part of this contract or part of this project that would be removed for design purposes only.
Okay, thank you very much.
And to follow up on that, I think you said you were also planting new trees as well.
Many new trees, yes. Which will be large caliber trees within the park as well, not small little saplings.
Okay. All right. Other questions? Okay. I think we don't have any final questions, so we should move to our discussion. And commissioners, I'm starting to request to unmute all of them so we can close the hearing. Okay, Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed. So this is a proposal to modify some paths, and we saw in the presentation the again, layers of history at this park and how the paths have been redesigned over time. These paths are similar to the previous layers in terms of their curvilinear nature, width, and paving materials. And for the Parks Department, as was represented, they address water runoff as well as barrier-free access and ease of circulation. So, and the question about, and then there are the removal of the 3 or 4 trees determined by the arborists to be in a poor condition, and then the replanting of many other large caliber trees. So the testimony that we heard about the environmental review process, as Mark has explained, is a separate process entirely from our process. So we have an application before us, and we should speak to the appropriateness issues of the project before us. Commissioner Devonshire, would you like to start this one?
I don't see anything objectionable about this. I'm in favor of it.
Commissioner Chen?
Likewise, yeah. I'm in agreement.
Commissioner Bland?
Yes, I'm in the same position. I just want to comment, though. It seems as if, particularly when it comes to parks, there's always a tempest that is around it. Not to say that it doesn't exist with buildings and new structures as well, but rather than viewing this in a negative way, I view it, frankly, as a positive issue, very positive. It's an indicator of how much New Yorkers love their parks and need their parks. Thank you, Mark, for clarifying, because I was beginning to be very confused about how to vote. And now I think your clarification of the separateness of these two issues makes it easier for me to say what has just been said very much more tersely, that this is an appropriate, it seems to me, an appropriate way to make these improvements of what is a very historic and important park in our city. So I'm in a position to vote favorably on it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
I've spent a lot of time in this park, which I think I've mentioned before. I actually learned to play tennis in this park, and I can appreciate a lot of the issues that it has. The big variations in topography, the issues with drainage, and the connectivity issues. I sort of feel like one of the main complaints here is that there hasn't been enough discussion with the community. And as we know, that is critical always. I can't speak to whether or not that's true, but I just want to emphasize how critical that is in every single public project. I hope that whether or not that's happened, I hope it continues in the future. I think in terms of the Fort Greene Park Conservancy, which is the steward for this park, spoke to that, but they also spoke about how important these changes are. And I think in terms of what's needed here, which is more accessibility, more connectivity, and also dealing with the stormwater management issue, that this project seems very effective. And it's actually a very, I'm going to say, understated effort. It's not trying to overreach in any way. So I can support it.
Okay. Sorry, Commissioner Jefferson.
Oh, this is such a clear diagram of intent that it's simple, the paths are simple and almost minimal. I can approve this.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson.
Noting that this is a partial plan, and having seen some of the destruction that's been done in the name of Parks Without Borders, I can approve this as is, but that's not a reflection on how Landmarks is going to rule on the rest of this plan when that plan does come up. So limited to what is presented to us right here, this I think is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
I agree with Commissioner Gustafson's point and think that what we are seeing today is appropriate.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yes, I agree that what we're shown today in this presentation is appropriate.
And Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree. It's appropriate. We just from a landmark's point of view, the fact that no trees are being removed for the imposition of the changes is significant. The other trees mentioned are maintenance related and would not fall within our scope anyway. Generally speaking, the paths, while they don't recreate historic paths, are in the same style and general location as the historic paths, and the kind of naturalistic configuration that follows the topography. And we have in the past been very flexible in terms of modifying pathways when they seek to accommodate handicapped accessibility. And I think this is a perfect example of where that would be appropriate to do as well. So I really think that this is a sensitive application and is totally appropriate.
Okay, thank you. So I think we do have a consensus to approve. Commissioner Devonshire, would you read the motion?
Sure. In the matter of Fort Greene Park in the Fort Greene Historic District, an application to install barrier-free access pathways, I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work would not eliminate or damage any significant features of the park, that the creation of proposed pathways within this section of the landscape will not disrupt an extant historic composition of pathways. The changes to the topography at the site precludes restoration of historic pathway patterns within this section of the park without extensive regrading and the risk of damage to mature trees. That the proposed pathways and railing will help provide barrier-free access to prominent sections of the park and be consistent with historic pathways which formerly existed in terms of their curvilinear footprint and spacing. That the pathways will feature materials, placements, and widths which will help to remain harmonious with the subordinate to the historic plazas to which they connect. And the paving and curbing will be in keeping with adjoining pathway paving curbing in terms of proportions, materials, finishes, profiles, details, helping them to maintain the unity of the pathway system. That the railing will be simply designed, well scaled to the pathway, and finished in a dark color, helping it to blend with its context and remain a discrete presence, and the proposed work will enhance the public experience of the park.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Letby.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
So that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next public hearing item.
Next hearing item is number 2, LPC 21-08044, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 267, lot 7, 109 State Street in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. This is a Greek Revival style row house built in 1839, and the application is to alter front and side areaways, modify and install new window openings, add an oriel window, alter the rear extension, and construct rooftop additions.
And commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. You may begin.
Okay, can you hear me? Am I?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, okay. Could we have the first page, please? So this is just a little sketch at the start of the project of the side elevation of Sydney Place. Can I have the next slide, please? The project is in the southeast corner of the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. It is at the corner of Sydney Place and State Street. You can see the tax photo from 1940 and then the designation 1980 photo of the property. I would just draw your attention on the 1940s tax photo to the two blind windows in the upper left-hand corner. And then could we have the next slide, please? These are just some shots, photographs of the existing conditions of the house. It is originally a single-family house that was converted to a 5-family house, presumably in the 30s, 20s or 30s. It is heavily degraded building in need of much love and attention, but super handsome house nonetheless. So, so just some photos of the front. Can we have the next slide, please? This is the side elevation of this building, and you can see the modifications that occurred for the conversion of this building from single family into multifamily. And in particular, a bedroom window was added on the 3rd floor up top. You can see it's a sort of unusual size. 2 kitchen windows on the 2nd floor, also inappropriately sized. And then other windows have been added down on the garden level or the basement level of the building below that water table, course of brownstone. Also, you can see that the top approximately 6 feet of a parapet and chimneys are heavily degraded and falling in on the roof gradually. So that is a big part of our project. So if we, next slide, please. This is some photographs of the existing extension on the building, which we believe is it's a sort of T-porch-like structure that is original to the building. It shows up in all the Sanborn maps going back to its arrival on the scene. So it is an original portion of the building. It was never added. But you can see this has been modified many times over the years and is in rough shape. So can we have the next slide? The next slide here is showing the scope of work on this project, by and large, the main elements that we're asking for your review on. And so starting at the top and working our way down, we are adding a new angled bulkhead clad in lead-coated copper. You see that this is minimally sized. It's a product that called a skylight product that allows us to minimize the size of the bulkhead. So that skylight door pops up and allows access onto a roof deck. We also have a solar array at the front part of the property. Because of the height of the parapet on Sydney Place and on State Street, none of this is visible from those principal thoroughfares. I'll show you later that it is visible from up Sydney Place. So then moving down, we are modifying the window on the 3rd floor to match the other windows on that floor. We are removing the 2 kitchen windows from the 2nd floor and in adding a small oval window in a bathroom that's in that spot. Continuing down, we are adding an oriel window to the building, and then we are making the window that's to the left of that oriel window into a blind window to match the windows on the 2nd and 3rd floor. We are then also reworking the rear elevation to create a sort of a more T-porchy looking elevation that allows for much greater visual access from the house out to the garden. I have a small modest deck that then allows access into that garden. The property is an undersized lot, so this sort of visual access to this greenery is important. We are then also doing a little bit of excavation to provide a stair access from a side yard into the backyard, and that's where the rubbish for the house will be kept in that side yard. It's currently there, just sitting on the sidewalk. We are extending the decorative ironwork from the side yard all the way down to the end of the property, which is what you're seeing, to create a sort of double fence. There's an existing 8-foot-high fence that you can see already along the property line, and then this is extending into the side yard, and we are seeking permission for this, both from landmarks and from the DOT from a revocable consent standpoint. We're also doing some modifications to the front yard where we are lowering a small part of the front yard to improve access for strollers and scooters and all that sort of stuff to the understoop area. So could I have the next slide, please? This is the inspiration for I'm going to now speak most specifically about the rear extension work. This is a photograph of the Greek Revival row houses and their T-porches on Willow Street that we are taking sort of as our inspiration for the back of our project. Could I have the next slide, please? This is the current state of those buildings, and you can see that specifically the building in the middle of this row has these large double hung weight and chain windows. And that is kind of the language that we are exploring. I would also just draw your attention quickly to the open porch condition to the right of those double hung windows, where the T-porch is allowed to read, in this case, as a loggia, and to the point where the handrails have been painted a darker color to allow the sort of white columns to read strongly. So next slide, please. This is another sort of set of images of T-porch-like elements that are near our site. Our site's down there in the lower right-hand corner. There's a nice wood T-porch on the corner of State and Henry. There is a T-porch that is still open directly across the street from ours. And then another T-porch element over on Girolamo and Henry. Could I have the next slide, please? This is a view looking directly south on Sydney Place. Our building is there on the left and just to the right of the yellow house. And then across Sydney Place, you can see the T-porch on the opposite corner and then the filled-in T-porch next to that and so on. And then next slide. And this is our proposed alteration of that rear facade, showing our sort of white columns and our darkly painted double hung weight and chain windows there. And then a small, there is an existing deck on this building on the second floor. We are just reworking that with a planter and a rail. This is also a good chance to just see that there, you can see the handrail in this rendering of that rooftop deck and a little tippy top of that daylighter rooftop access item. Next slide, please. In this slide, we're just pointing out that we are sort of mimicking the condition on the right side of the street with the double fence line where the house on the right has a wood fence and then an outer iron fence along the sidewalk. We have an existing iron fence that we are maintaining, and we are adding a second iron fence that aligns up with the ironwork we already have. Next slide. These are some other examples of this sort of double fence condition that exists around the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. Next slide. Okay, the next couple of items are on the side, on the Sydney Place facing facade. Here, as I mentioned earlier, we are enlarging the window on the third floor so that it matches the other windows and masonry openings on that floor. We are restoring the decorative lintels and the sills on this floor. We are then adding this oval window, and the oval window is being added both to provide light into that room, but it's also a compositional element because of how it interacts or has to interact with the proposed oriel window. So the oriel window is really the big move, if you will, on this project, and it has a programmatic reason, which is it is providing light into a formal dining room that exists within the parlor floor of this house. That room is currently very dark, has no light, and so we thought that this would be an interesting way to connect this house to the street, bring light into that space, and it's just sort of a compositionally strong element. And we are then, because we are putting this thing here, we are then wanting to fill in and create a new blind window just to the left of that facade. We are also adding or taking away and adding and moving some windows below that water table on the garden floor. And you can see that we're lining them up with the center line of the oriel and the center line of the blind windows. The next slide, please. These are some other oriel windows that exist nearby. One is on the next corner up to the north of our project, number 9, and then 2 of the others are right around the corner on Girolamo. But we have oriel windows are a pretty prevalent element of corner buildings in historic districts. And then next slide, please. A thing we're doing, which we think is pretty cool, is this oriel window is on a Greek Revival house that was built 9 years after the 109 State Street was built. It is in the Cobble Hill Historic District. It is an oriel window that we had to get permission from Landmarks to remove from this building, which is 437 Henry Street, about 8 or 9 years ago. And at the time that we sought this approval and obtained this approval, Sarah asked us to do a very detailed survey of this oriel window, and so that that its existence would be kept and would be known, and could, who knows what it could be done. But anyway, what could be done with it is, if you could take a look on next page, please. This is the survey drawings that we did at LPC's request at the time, and when this job came up and we had this request, and then there was a design need in the house for it, I sort of realized, oh, we can take this bay window out of the ether and land it back on a building of the same age and style. And so that is what we've done. And so there's the next page is some more details of that. So we've rescued this window and brought it. We're proposing to bring it back to life on the side of this building. So next slide is this is the existing condition, and then next slide, this is our 2 proposed modifications. So you can see the oriel, the blind window, the windows down below, and then our T-porch alterations in the rear. Next slide. These are some T-porches we've done in the past in historic districts that I'm just including to sort of demonstrate the type of detailing we're proposing to use on this project. Next slide, please. Uh-oh. Frozen. Next slide. I see it's a watch. There we go. Okay, this is the existing and the proposed, and a section through the building just describing the construction. And I think the middle image is really demonstrating what we're doing with doors and windows and paneling and the use of color. And then also showing the rooftop stuff. Next page. This is just the details for these sheets. Next. Upstairs and downstairs. This is the lower level. Okay, and then this is a rooftop plan. We're just trying to show you that we are actually dropping the roof level. There's a cock loft on this building, and we're dropping the roof level so that so that the new structure is in place to carry the deck. Here's a section through the building, both to make access to the roof easier, but more importantly to push down the things that clutter up the roof that we don't want to see. So by dropping this roof, we're able to hide we're able to hide the solar panels, we're able to hide the air conditioning condensers, and we're largely able to hide the bulkhead itself. Next. These are just some mock-ups. The complete triangle is the bulkhead, the wedge is the solar panels. And then the orange on the left was the gate. So some photographs of the mock-up. You can see, from 40 feet up the block, you can see a little bit of the deck, and this is probably 200 feet up the block. You can see a little bit of the angled bulkhead here. And little top of the handrail, not much. Okay. Final item is the excavation of the front yard. So this is just showing you the existing condition. So there's a little drop down in the front, and then the basement entry is of course difficult and not easy to negotiate with a stroller or a bike or any of those things. So can we go to the next slide? So we are proposing to drop the areaway in front of that window, slightly move the gate and the access down so that it's closer to the center line of the pier between the 2 windows. We would the brownstoning on this house will all be redone or stucco repair, and so we will be able to drop the stucco down to the area that's covered, the brownstone stucco. And this will provide more comfortable access for the family. Currently, there's a wood door on this where we'll restore the ironwork and move the door back to the face of the building. Next slide, please. And finally, this is the slide on the right is showing the existing front and side yard, and then the space on the upper sort of northern edge is just concrete right now. The slide on the left is showing our extension of our ironwork and the planter down just to the end of the property, which also does in fact align with the ironwork and front yards of the row houses and the carriage house for the rest of the block. Next slide. These are some other sunken front yards of various forms directly in direct proximity to our project. So there is precedent for this alteration to occur. And next slide. And that is it. That is that's the extent of what we got to show you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, I don't think we have any questions at this time. So let's see if we have public testimony, and we may come back with questions after that. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and I'll turn it over to Lisa to take us through the testimony.
Okay, thank you. And to start with people that signed up to speak in advance. So Jeremy Lexon. Okay, Jeremy, there you go. Please just state your name for the record.
Hi, good afternoon. Jeremy Lexon. I'm the chair of the Landmarks Committee of the Brooklyn Heights Association. Thank you, commissioners, for allowing us to testify. We support this application. We think the project is well thought out, and we look forward to the design and the style of the oriel window being brought back to life from the archives. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay. Next we'll go with John Graham.
Great.
Okay, John, I brought you in.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. Founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual landmarks, interiors, and civic art. The VSNY can support some aspects of this proposal, including the alterations to the front and side areaways, the enlargement of the window on the 3rd floor on Sydney Place, the alterations to the rear extension, and the proposed rooftop additions. However, we strongly object to the other changes proposed for Sydney Place, the addition of the oriel window on the parlor floor and the small oval window on the 2nd floor, both for the way these new elements would detract from the building and the way that they would detract from the streetscape. The beauty of this facade lies in both its symmetry and its severity. We note that the original builder carefully and deliberately created a symmetrical facade here, going to the length of using blind windows on the left side to balance the actual window openings on the right-hand side. We also note that the beautiful arched opening at the main entrance is the only real flourish on the entire building, and that the entrance is more dependent on its proportions than on any applied trim for its impact. The building contributes to the streetscape in the way it mirrors the equally severe facade of the building at 107 State Street, seen in the photo on board 9. The oriel window is the biggest problem. Its placement would destroy the historic balance of this street wall and add an atypical decorative element. Its size and massing would diminish the building's relationship to 107. But the oriel window on the 2nd floor is also problematic. We can't object to the removal of the pair of modern windows, which we find to be poorly proportioned, but must object to the design of the new window, which typifies what we see as a tendency for applicants to shop the neighborhood for the prettiest historic elements they can find to add to facades that they feel are overly plain. We urge the Commission to deny the proposal to add the oriel window and to instruct the applicant to work with staff to design a 2nd floor window which respects the severity of the historic facade. Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Diego Raballo.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Diego. I work for the Historic Districts Council. For full
Excuse me,
disclosure,
Diego,
Brandon
I think
Coburn
we're
is one of
having,
the principals of the architectural firm of record for this project. Can you?
I think we're having some sound problems. You're either have a very slow voice or an extremely fast one. I'm not sure if it's a Wi-Fi issue.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now that's much better.
Oh, perfect. Sorry, my headphones. So for full disclosure, Brandon Coburn is one of the principals of the architectural firm of record for this project, and he serves on HDC's board, acting as the co-chair of our public review committee. So Mr. Coburn recused himself from the committee's reviews on this project. HDC supports this proposal, finding the proposed alterations to be appropriate and sympathetic to the original designs, the alterations in the front and side areaways, as well as the modifications and installations of new window openings are consistent with the architecture of the building and the neighborhood. So well done, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay, thank you. And Anthony, did we receive any additional written testimony?
So Brooklyn Community Board 2 voted to approve the application as presented, and we do not have any other written testimony for this item.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Brendan, would you like to respond to the comments we've heard?
You know, I appreciate what John was saying. I think that, you know, I like the severity of that facade as well, but I think that these buildings are quite capable of handling changes and modifications over time. And I think that Oriel windows put on these buildings are a change that has occurred, and that in this particular case serves a very specific function for the way the house's use has changed over time. Because, you know, once upon a time there'd be staff working on the garden floor and, you know, bringing meals up to the formal dining room in the rear via the extension. Now the entire family lives on that one main floor. And because of that, the kitchen's on the floor, the dining room's on the floor. So there is a changed use, and so this sort of window, this sort of device is appropriate. I also think it's appropriate to the style of the building. I also think that the facade is itself not actually symmetrical. It has a motion, and the motion is sort of, you know, heading towards the south part of the neighborhood, and it's put in motion by that rear extension. So I think that this Oriel window works well as a balancing item on this facade. And then the oval window, I mean, we looked at a square window, we looked at a round window, we looked at a rectangular window. The oval came about not by shopping the neighborhood, but by, you know, having a sort of compositional point of view that says this is going to play against that Oriel in the most effective way. So that's you know, that's I think how I would answer those questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any final questions? Okay, I don't see any hands raised. Let me just scan the pictures too. Okay, I'm going to start to unmute everybody, or request to unmute you so that we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. Okay, and Commissioner Devonshire, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
I second the motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed, and we'll begin our discussion. And there are a number of adjustments happening here. And so I just want to make sure that we discuss all components of the application. There's the new rear facade design on the rear facade of the existing extension that is taking its cues from the historic T-porches. There are the new window openings on the Sydney Place facade, including the bay window and the oriel window and the circular window. There is the proposal to bring the landscaped areaway and fencing all the way down the side property line on Sydney Place. Fourth, there's the changes to the front areaway to change the grading and entrance to the basement door. And finally, the rooftop railing and bulkhead and chimney flues. So Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start on this one?
Sure. I think that the areaway modifications are totally appropriate and well within the norms of things that we approve. I think that the rooftop is very skillfully handled, and I would request that staff note the bulkhead spec for the times when we have visible bulkheads. This is a solution that, you know, in the back of my very bad memory, we see this every few years. Someone comes up with this clever way of doing a bulkhead that doesn't stick up like a sore thumb. And we got to remember it and give it to everybody else because it's very, very useful. In terms of the grading and landscaping and fencing along the street, Sydney Place, I think that's lovely, wonderful, and very sensitive and is supported by evidence of being contextual and actually creates a nice symmetry of the streetscape across Sydney Place. I think that in terms of the Sydney Place facade, the Victorian Society's comments I take very seriously, but I think that the asymmetry of the placement of the bay window is consistent with the way townhouses have developed in this district over the years and is therefore appropriate. I think the oval window might be a bit charming, but I think that it's again, I think it's well within the norms. And in terms of the rear facade, it's very clear that, you know, some architects get paid by percentage of construction, some are paid by the hour. Brandon clearly gets paid by the number of times he says the word T-porch. I think that I credit Landmarks my years here with my learning about T-porches. No one ever taught me about T-porches, but now, thanks to Mr. Coburn and others, I feel like I'm a T-porch PhD, and this is certainly a thesis level T-porch that is totally appropriate.
Okay, thank you. And just with respect to the rooftop bulkhead, we do remember these, and when applicants come to us, we always ask them to study some of these other examples. And it's funny, sometimes they make it through DOB and sometimes they don't. And sometimes it's the occupancy that affects it, whether it's multiple dwelling or single family, but we've had mixed experiences at the Department of Buildings on it. So we're gonna keep pushing.
Don't get me started on that one, but it would be great if we ever have conversations at a certain level with the DOB to basically kind of say to them, this is what we want you to approve.
Yes, agree. Okay, Commissioner Devonshire.
First of all, Michael should know that real Americans drink coffee.
Not according to Brendan Coburn.
I am comfortable with every aspect of this except the elliptical window, which I believe should be larger. It looks almost like an afterthought, the size that it is. I think it needs to be larger. That said, I'm not going to disapprove this if no one else feels the same way.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with the two Michaels, and if majority wants to support Michael Devonshire's position, I'm willing to go with it.
Okay, Commissioner Bland?
Thought Wellington might object to the idea that real Americans drink coffee. On this august day of our first hearing item, I defer to him, however. You know, over the years, we see really just a handful of architects who have seemed to specialize in townhouses and their restoration in New York, all over New York. Brendan Coburn is certainly one of the best, consistently showing us how to do this. It's become his masterwork, I think, and I think this this project and this beautiful image that we're looking at right now is a good example of all of it together. I object to none of it. I don't want to look at it again, but if that oval window wants to be slightly bigger, I think that may be a staff level thing that Brendan might even look at. But so I don't need to comment on all of the various pieces of it. Michael Westside did it brilliantly initially. But I do want to comment on the Sydney Place side facade. You know, Brooklyn Heights, as well as all brownstone districts, have these side facades when they face, when they're in the corner. And to me, you know, the front facade is the front facade, and we're so used to knowing what they're all about, hoping they have a stoop, et cetera, et cetera. But it's these side facades that are so interesting, and they're varied, and they're not all the same. And there's not one way to do it. They're not all symmetrical. In fact, most of them are not symmetrical, partly for what Michael Goldblum said. They've been altered over time to relate to the continuing and contemporary occupancy of these buildings. So the placement of this new oriel window from the ashes of the archives of Brendan's firm, luckily asked for by Sarah, is such a serendipitous thing, and I'm glad it's finding a home here. And I think it's incredibly appropriate and will be a beautiful way to enliven this facade. I think this is a terrific proposal altogether.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
So my colleagues have very eloquently expressed their support for a wonderful, well-done project. I do also want to say that I do like that charming oval window, and I'm not concerned about the size. It could be larger, that would be fine. And I love the fact that that oriel window was rescued and reused in some way. It makes it extra special.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
Oh, okay. The oriel window is a welcome addition to the facade. It really works well to me. I think the oval window could be a bit larger because it's right in relationship to the oriel window, and the scale of them play against each other. So if the scale of the oval window was a bit larger, I wouldn't compare with it. The overall composition is beautifully done. I think it's a well-done project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Who is this owner? Who is this applicant? Who are these people? They give us a bulkhead designed to have a lower profile. They give us a solar array that's designed to be invisible, not raised 10 feet above the rooftop. They give us excavation so they can hide the garbage cans. They give us a modest areaway modifications. They preserve the top floor in the rear. They create a T-porch style extension. I get the severity issue, but who are these people and how do we clone them?
Okay. Okay, as is. As presented. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Yes, I agree with everyone. This is very well done. I actually think I understand the logic of the size of the oval window, and it's made clear in the hand rendering, the very first image in the presentation. It has to do with, you know, a decision about whether or not, if you go to that image of the hand-drawn, hand gouache, hand watercolored drawing, then you can see that obviously the architect doesn't want to have it kind of bump into the oriel. So it makes sense when you see it in that case. And I also think that the oriel is very interesting because it's, I would understand the questions around, if the kind of the severity of this side facade or side face is in some way kind of messed with. But I think that it's interesting that these Orioles actually don't do that. They don't detract from the kind of the severity or the pragmatic aspect of these side faces, in that the side faces are both like a result of the street layout, sort of where the building falls with respect to the edges of the street, but also the logic of the interior, the blind window where it's less needed, or the kind of the bathroom window where it can be. And so there is a lot of sense, I think, in this kind of very interior motivated, expressed in the Oriole, kind of asymmetrically and for no compositional reasons on this side of the building. So I think it works really well, and the T-porch just makes me jealous every day. So I think it's beautiful, well done, and appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Holford-Smith.
I agree with everything that everyone said already, so I'm not going to repeat it. But I would like to express my joy at the fact that they've been able to resurrect that Oriole from another building where it was lost, and use those proportions here. I think it works very well. I think it's a great project.
Okay, great. Thank you. I also agree, and I think with the Sydney Place facade, the combination of the Oriole window and the oval window sort of speak to the kind of eclectic facades that we now find on the sides of buildings in this district that have evolved with the different uses. So I support it as is as well. So I think we have enough commissioners to support it as is, but I would still encourage Brendan to think about that oval window if you choose to, and work with the staff on the proportions. But I think we can make a motion as is. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you make the motion?
Sure. Regarding 109 State Street in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District, the application is to alter front and side areaways, modify and install new window openings, add an Oriole window, alter the rear extension, and construct rooftop additions. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Brooklyn Heights Historic District, and I recommend approval. Finding that the proposed work will not damage or destroy any significant features of the building, that the design of the new rear facade of the extension, featuring paneled wood infill with a cream and dark blue finish and large multi-light double hung wood windows, will be harmonious with the fenestration at this building, and will be in keeping with the proportions, materials, and details of other visible T-porches typically found at buildings of this type, style, and age throughout the historic district. That the proposed wood Oriole window at the Sydney Place facade will be a reproduction of a historic Oriole window that was removed from a row house of similar age and style, and will help provide further articulation at this facade, and will be consistent with other Oriole windows found at the long facade of corner buildings in the surrounding streets. That the proposed changes to the window openings, in addition of the new window openings at the Sydney Place facade, will be in keeping with the historic fenestration pattern and presence of infilled window openings at this facade. That the extension of the landscaped area at the Sydney Place sidewalk and layering of the tall fence at the yard with a shorter fence at the areaway is consistent with the treatment of at other corner buildings in the district, and the fencing will have an open quality to provide views into the block, and the new ironwork will match the material scale, details, height, and finish of existing historic ironwork at the side areaway. That the excavation at the side area will be limited in nature and will not result in the removal of any historic paving and will not detract from the streetscape. That the reconfiguration and excavation of the front area will reuse existing historic ironwork, will improve access to the door under the stoop, and will be consistent with alterations at other front areaways on this block. That the lead-coated copper bulkhead and wood-capped metal railing at the roof will only be visible from a limited vantage point on the Sydney Place over the rear facade. That the flues will have limited visibility from State Street over the side facade, and will be consistent with other flues at this and other buildings, and the rooftop accretions will not detract from the significant architectural features of the building or other buildings on the block, and that the work will not diminish the special architectural and historic character of the building or of the historic district. Period.
Sarah, need a second?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Commissioner Gustafson, would you second the motion?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so that's approved. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
and Good luck. Okay,
Thank you.
we are now, it's 1 o'clock. We're going to break for lunch and we will resume at 1:30. We are behind schedule, so when we come back at 1:30, we will pick up on the agenda at item number 3, 89 Remsen Street, and continue the agenda in its order. So I'll see you all at 1:30. Commissioners, just turn off your audio and video, and we'll ask all members of the public to exit the meeting now and rejoin at 1:30.